Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoy this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience.
It doesn't work like that. You realize that the success of your wife's treatment depends largely on the operation, and as soon as possible. You can't delay. This has been discussed many times. Doctors have spoken with one voice. "Why have you gathered your consilium to educate me here?" William was indignant. "Your business is to treat. Then do it, and don't mess with my head." "But you have to give your consent in case something goes wrong," resented one of the members of the medical council. "And in that case, we'll have a vegetable?" "No, I don't want that. If she can't live, switch off the equipment now. It's time for Amanda to go after her parents." "I'm not a sentimental man," William explained, "and if she dies, don't resuscitate her. Send her to the morgue. I think that's what Amanda would want to do herself, just walk away without the hassle. Don't torture her." In general, this hospital consilium was the exception rather than the rule. In one of the wards, a still quite young and very rich woman was dying quietly. She could not be helped because the treatment was engaged in a person, to put it mildly, in medicine accidental. The son of the head doctor, who got his position through an acquaintance. His name was Mr. Alex, and he was a 30-year-old doctor, a party animal, and a drunkard who lived his life in nightclubs. His position in the department was sincerely considered nominal. As best they could, they covered for Mr. Scholl in front of review boards and relatives of patients. But there was one problem. Mr. Alex was vain. He preferred to see the most valuable patients in the paid wards. Amanda, the owner of a large chain of ateliers and sewing factories, fell into the hands of this woeful doctor. While her husband William at the next consilium demanded to stop fighting for his wife's life, the equipment in her room showed that the heart rhythm had slowed down, requiring urgent resuscitation. The nurses immediately called for Mr. Alex, but at that very moment he was suffering from a severe hangover from last night's party. His head was literally splitting. His eyes felt like sand had been poured into them and his throat was dry. And then there were the nurses with their voices, which made my head ache. Mr. Alex came to the ECU when all the necessary steps had been taken. He glanced at the monitor, then checked the vitals again and ordered, "Stop resuscitation, she's dead. Send her to the morgue," and left the room. "Mr. Alex, we've got paperwork to draw up, paperwork to sign. The nurses are frantic." "Bring them to my office. Then give me a break." "Just gotta work," muttered the head of the department and walked out. Again after the party, remarked one of the nursing staff, "Oh, impose the sun on our head. It's only going to get worse. He doesn't know anything at all. When is this upstart going to get his way? He's killed another patient with his treatment. Once again, nobody cares." We all sighed. They called the morgue attendant who was to take the body to the pathology department. One of the nurses went to look for the head doctor. Didn't find him there. He was found at the consultation that was being held about that patient, Amanda. In a loud whisper, the nurse informed him that there was no point in discussing it any further. The patient had died. There was no help for her. Hearing this conversation, William only smiled contentedly. Now he had full control over his wife's money. He walked briskly out into the corridor and strode towards the exit of the ward, trying to conceal his joy. A skinny man in a medical mask was wheeling out a gurney covered with a body. William stepped closer, blocked the way, pulled back the sheet. There lay his wife Amanda, pale, breathless, made even more ugly by her illness. He put the sheet back in place, nodded that he could continue on his way, and got into the lift and dialed his mistress's number. "Well, we're free. She's finally dead. You can congratulate me. I don't think we'll see each other again in the next month, though. There's a lot of work to be done, but then you can organize a chance meeting." "Oh, that's good. I didn't realize your Amanda was going to die. She's been in and out of hospitals for so long. It took a lot of money to treat her. Not more than we could afford, of course. But still, every dollar was like a knife to the heart, replied Merrill. Anyway, things will change soon. But in the meantime, I'm going to be very busy. So what's the point of the consilium? Waste of time, grinned Merrill. Well, of course, they insisted on the operation, and they say that Amanda may not be able to bear it. Why should I take that risk? Let's just do it straight away without resuscitation and all that. So I wasn't going to agree to the surgery. Let them talk, I don't care. You see how lucky it was she left on her own. William left the hospital and went to the car, but realized that he had not asked how to proceed. He had to go back. Meanwhile, the gurney with Amanda had already reached the door of the pathology department. The orderly shouted to a local colleague to take her in, but he pulled back the sheet, started groping and rubbing the woman for some reason. Then he shouted, "She's alive. Quickly call the lift and let's go back to the intensive care unit." He pushed the bewildered colleague back in and pressed the up button. "What are you, smarty pants, have already poor eyes from the morning?" He was indignant. "Well, actually, I am a doctor, a surgeon resuscitator by training," explained the man. "I can tell the difference between dead and alive. Believe me." "Come on. What are you doing as an orderly?" Mr. Peter wondered. "You're young and you've already graduated from the university." "I'm a child prodigy," Craig grinned, "from a medical family actually. But I got caught up in a mess under the last head doctor. They pinned a surgical error on me. I can't go back to work until my sentence is up, so I'm working as an orderly until the first mistake." Oh, Mr. Peter grinned. "And I was wondering why Mr. Alex is being so friendly with me." "You call him Alex?" Mr. Peter was surprised. "We're classmates." Craig burst into flames. "All right, here we go. Let's go. We can't do it in the corridor. We've got to get her on the monitor." A strange team burst into the IQ. Luckily, the rest of the staff realized quickly. Amanda was returned to the bed, hooked up to the monitor, and resuscitated, following the morgue attendant's commands. A lot of people here knew Craig's history and weren't surprised by his commanding tone. This talented guy had been accused and convicted of a completely far-fetched charge. Half an hour later, it was clear the patient was indeed alive. Her heart rate and blood pressure had stabilized. Amanda was left in intensive care, and Craig went to the office, where his former classmate was suffering after last night's festivities. What did he get out of it? "Can't you tell the living from the dead?" "What are you talking about, Craig?" Mr. Alex was outraged. "Are you out of your mind?" "I'm still there in my morgue, among the dead, resuscitated your patient. Go on, take the job." "Craig, which one is that?" "Amanda Swan from room 6. "Oh, really?" "I've already started on the death certificate." Mr. Alex got excited. "I'll have to." "Oh, come on. That's what you told me when you were cheating on your notes," Craig grinned. "Go report the dead man canceled. Your father must be furious." He went out into the corridor and headed for the lift. At the morgue, he encountered a large, tall man who was trying to shout at the pathologist. William, and it was him, demanded, "No, you tell me. Where's my wife's body? When's the post-mortem? I've got a coffin to organize, a funeral." "How can I tell you? If the body has not arrived to us," the pathologist fought back. "Who do you want?" Craig asked. "The woman who was brought down from intensive care." "So she's alive. I sent her back to the ICU. Your wife is there now. You can go upstairs and check with her doctor." "Who the hell are you?" The smart one yelled at him. "William, why were you even examining her? You could have taken an inventory of the body, that's all. She's dead. What else is there to wait for? They'd just stick her in the fridge." "What an unconventional reaction you have to the news," Craig grinned, "for an inconsolable widower." "But don't you tell me how to behave." William grabbed the orderly by the pecs and pushed him against the wall. "I'll take the likes of you down with one stone. Maybe we'll see each other again." Then he let go of Craig and strode towards the exit of the building. There was a separate porch from the morgue directly onto the street. Meanwhile, on the 3rd floor of the hospital, the head doctor was reprimanding his son. He didn't care much for Craig as it was, and had only taken him in at Mr. Alex's request. He also had the advantage of delegating minor work to his classmate and often consulted him informally on complicated cases. Well, have we had enough? We almost embarrassed ourselves. It's good that the relative is so understanding, or they would have made a scandal about murderous doctors. They'd have made a fuss in the press. Alex, I value my position. Come on, Dad. Mr. Gregory. Alex justified himself. He saved her. And I want to tell you about him too. The head doctor grumbled. You should stop this unnecessary friendship with the orderly. Firstly, it is not to your status, and secondly, do not forget, even in a penal colony, but he served time. Yes, a short one, and by law he can even work as a doctor. But I don't want that. Your Craig's too smart. I see your point, Alex answered his father glumly. What about this patient Amanda? Where will she go after resuscitation? I'll decide, Mr. Gregory replied. Go and get yourself cleaned up. It's scary to look at. And finish your night shift. The nurses are already complaining that your hands are shaking. While they were sorting things out, Craig slowly made his way up from the morgue to the IQ and into Amanda's room. She was already lying there with her eyes open. How are you? The orderly asked her. Everything all right? You can celebrate your second birthday. The woman blinked back at him and a tear rolled down her cheek. No need to cry. If you get better, you'll be moved to a ward. Here's the thing, you have to have an operation. You have to do it. I've seen your husband, he's just waiting to take you to the grave. Fight it. Did I bring you back here from the morgue for nothing? You hear me, Amanda? Don't give up. There's a chance, but you need surgery. Amanda waved twice to let me know she understood. The breathing mask on her face prevented her from speaking. Craig smiled, adjusted her sheet, and left the room. He took the lift down to the morgue, only to be criticized by his boss. He was a good man, but he couldn't defend his subordinate. Craig, what do you want more than anyone? Mr. Andrews snorted indignantly. Now you've performed the miracle of resurrection. What's next? Do you also think we should have put the woman in the fridge? Asked the guy with a chuckle. Or do you allow alternative options? I'm upset that I don't have a normal orderly during the day, admitted the pathologist. The head doctor ordered you to take the night shift. Sorry, mate, that's the end of my powers. What's wrong with that? I always suffer from my good heart. Craig laughed. I'm sorry, Mr. Andrew, but I'm already the bottom of the hospital hierarchy. There's nowhere else to fall. It's hard to sack me without a reason. Oh well, let's just let the mediocre ones go. It won't make Alex a doctor. The pathologist just chuckled and went to work. He realized that Craig was right, but he was powerless against his boss and his son, with whom everyone in the hospital was dissatisfied. Meanwhile, William arrived home, seething with rage. He was literally out of his mind. Entering the house, he pushed his mother's dog, who rushed towards him. He threw his jacket on the floor, kicked the mirror with his fist, which sent shards flying. William, why are you making so much noise? Mrs. Samantha came out of the kitchen. Stop making so much noise. Go back to the kitchen. Oh, why are you breaking furniture? Go wash your hands. I don't need anything. I'd rather have a stiff drink. We've got news, William growled. Amanda was declared dead, and then some idiot sent her back from the morgue to be resuscitated. So she's alive. And instead of probate, I have to keep going to the hospital pretending to be the loving spouse of this vegetable. But how can it be, William? Mrs. Samantha wailed. We've waited so long. It's not as if fate has given her a chance to live longer. If this goes on, I'll kill the bitch myself, William shouted, slamming his fist on the table. I hate her. When is she going to die? Oh, come on. At least have some manners in public, complained his mother. In fact, eat something, or you'll get sick on an empty stomach. She began to fuss over her son, while she thought of William losing control of himself. Mrs. Samantha didn't like that. She herself preferred to be in charge of her son, and with the arrival of Merrill, whom she herself had approved of, things had gone wrong. The son became too willful and more often acted on the orders of others. A couple of days later, Amanda was moved from the IQ back to the ward. The first night, as she lay staring out the white-painted hospital window, someone cautiously entered the room. Who was it? Amanda asked in a whisper. What do you want from me? Don't worry, Craig replied. It's me. I've seen you in the ACU before." "Oh, I see you now," Amanda answered. "Why are you here at night?" "You can't come in the daytime. I'm here illegally. I work in the morgue, or rather, in the pathology department. But it's a bit early for you." "No, it's not. I don't want to be in a hurry," Amanda smiled. "Are you a doctor?" "I used to be," Craig replied evasively. "Long and uninteresting story. How are you feeling?" "Weak. The usual." "My heart's beating normally, then it's racing," Amanda complained. "What's your name?" "Craig. And can I use your first name?" "Look, you absolutely need surgery. There's no way around it. The sooner the better. Don't listen to anyone. If they say you can't have it, it's a load of bollocks. Your disease can't be treated with pills and stuff. It's pathological. There's not enough clearance." "Got it. Hey, what's the sky like now? Any stars?" Amanda suddenly asked. "You can call me Amanda, by the way. Everyone's been calling me that since I was a kid. My husband used to call me Queen. That was a long time ago, really. Now, I'm just a body, a useless vegetable." "Yes, it's a starry night. You can't see." "Yeah, well, the windows are in the ward." Craig smiled. "Hang on. I'll open the window for a minute and you can see for yourself." "Yeah, that'd be nice. I hadn't seen the sky in months, only the hospital walls and ceiling." Craig opened the window and they looked at the stars for a while. Then he closed the sashes. A nurse's head appeared in the doorway. "Craig, come to us. They're bringing Grandpa down from the second operating theater. Poor bloke's exhausted. We didn't have time to do anything. You'll have to open him up." Craig said goodbye, promised to come back when he was on duty, and disappeared out the door. And Nurse Emily sighed. "Wow, so young, so talented, 35 years old, and such a difficult fate." "Please tell me I can't sleep anyway," Amanda asked. "Why do you need our hospital gossip?" She grinned. "It might be worth listening to, though. He saved your life." Anyway, Craig was the star of his class. He came from a medical family. His grandfather was a professor. They still teach doctors today from his books. Mom was a very good gynecologist. Everybody wanted to see her. She saw half of our town at the maternity hospital. Well, nobody knew who Craig's father was. "Wow, that's interesting," Amanda whispered. "Yeah, listen. He went to school with our head of department, Mr. Alex. Then he worked in a good hospital, not like ours, but in a big city. Then he was falsely accused, well, I don't know the details, and convicted. While he was in prison, Craig's mom, Mrs. Olivia, had a stroke, paralyzed her. And because Craig was in custody, he was sent to a nursing home. That's where he's been living for a while. He's only been out less than a year." "Was he married?" Amanda asked. "He was handsome after all." "Yes, he married someone at work," Emily said. "It didn't work out. And now he's afraid to get involved with anyone." "Well, I've told you a lot of bedtime stories." The nurse left. Amanda closed her eyes and began to think about how she'd ended up in such a vulnerable position. For as long as she could remember, she had always loved to sew. At first, she learned simple stitches from her grandmother in the village. Then she learned to use a machine and started making outfits for dolls. Later at school, she enrolled in a sewing class. Then she told her parents that she was going to study at a textile institute. She enrolled herself. She studied to become a fashion designer and mastered production processes. Her parents didn't interfere with her studies. She saw them too rarely in those years. Dad and Mom tried to shield their daughter from their problems. In the end, Amanda learned about her father's heart condition after his death. Following him, her mom left too. Just a month later, Amanda experienced a double funeral, and it was very hard. But then, pulling herself together, she made her graduation collection. When she returned home, she realized that she couldn't physically stay in her parents' flat. So she moved into her grandmother's tiny one-bedroom and sold the three-bedroom. She used the money to open her first atelier, bought fabrics, equipment, and hired staff. The business went, although at first Amanda, of course, herself sat at the machine, adjusting the size of trousers and dresses. 5 years later, opening her 10th salon, she realized how in demand the business was. Amanda was triumphant. And a week later, she was offered to buy a rundown garment factory at a bargain price. Amanda would not have been able to pull off such a deal alone, but by that time she already had acquaintances in business circles and found investors who were ready to invest money. They also joined the board of directors of the new enterprise. Now, 10 years later, Amanda realized that it was the best decision of her life. The factory was functioning, producing textiles and bed linen, which were eagerly bought. They entered the marketplaces and were growing all the time. She found she had a talent for hiring people who were really passionate about what they were doing. The deputy, Mr. Matthew, for example, was not just a brilliant tailor, but a manager from God. And other employees of the factory owner did not let the owner down even in the most crisis periods. Having already become the owner of a solid fortune and an enviable bride, she met William. Amanda herself assessed herself quite sensibly. She understood perfectly well that she did not possess beauty, but she was intelligent, tastefully chose clothes, and had a good understanding of men. William came to their factory with a wholesale order. He was a Sambo coach working with children at the sports school. The sight of a sturdy guy with distinctive shoulders touched something in Amanda's heart, all the more so because the order was unusual. William wanted the factory to produce for their section branded sets of uniforms for young athletes with logos for competitions and classes. You see, our children perform a lot. It is necessary for the material to be of high quality, and they need to develop the necessary pride for the club. But we have a limited budget. That's the problem. A lot of children from low-income families. That's okay, we'll try to make a discount, Amanda replied. Let's show you what you want. Here you go. This is my own. But the kids' ones are the same. William pulled a set of uniforms out of his bag. Amanda took it upon herself to design the model. They had many phone calls with William, discussing the details. She even went to a training session for the young wrestlers to see what their uniforms would look like in motion, what allowances to leave. When the collaboration ended, it was even a little sad, but it turned out to be a real boon for the business. Orders for children's uniforms poured into their factory. And then William called and asked her out on a date, then another date, and they started dating. William introduced her to his mom, Mrs. Samantha. Luckily, she really liked her. And after a year of dating, the couple decided to get married. I'm not good at proposing, William warned her, but I'll try to make you happy. I agree, she replied. You know, I think we'll both benefit from it. But we must have a prenup. I'm sorry, my lawyers insist on it. The factory is a big business. And it's not just mine. You know, the risks to the investors. Okay, sure, you're rich. All I have is a uniform, William laughed. And for the first few years, that was true. Amanda spent a lot of time with her mother-in-law and her husband, and bought a house where they all lived together. But as time went on, Mrs. Samantha decided that a daughter-in-law was unnecessary in their happy life. She began to set her son against, all the time reminded that Amanda cannot give birth to a child to her husband. She also insinuated that wives sometimes have accidents. At 37, Amanda developed the same heart condition as her father. It progressed rapidly. Surgery was needed, but local doctors lacked equipment and skills. She sponsored a clinic to buy the necessary equipment. Her husband and mother-in-law were already rubbing their hands together, waiting for a quick resolution. They had consulted several professors and knew that in Amanda's case, time could literally kill. That's why William wouldn't consent to her surgery. Of course, Amanda didn't know everything fully, but she knew how to listen. From the conversations of the staff, she had managed to understand that her husband at the consilium was very happy about her possible death. And now she was lying and thinking about how much she would like to go outside at least once more, to breathe in the warm summer air, to lie in the grass, and also, if she was lucky, to hold her own child to her breast. But now procreation was out of the question. Amanda was literally losing strength and didn't know if she would be able to wake up tomorrow. While she was in her hospital room reminiscing, her husband and mother-in-law were making plans. William hadn't coached anyone in a long time. The children's sports school had been forgotten. He lived comfortably on his wife's money and didn't want anything to change. If Amanda died, he'd have everything. Until then, he was content with dividends and some of the profits from the factory. Mrs. Samantha wanted more too, and so she sat and persuaded her son. There's nothing to wait for if she doesn't die herself. We've got to get her declared incompetent. Figure out how to get the right certificate, William. That'll solve all our problems." "Where am I going with this certificate?" grinned the son. "To the board of shareholders," Mrs. Samantha explained. "Will you tell them that you will manage your wife's assets as her successor? That's enough. She's a dead man anyway." "Do we have to sit around and wait for her to be taken to the cemetery?" "Oh, Mum, you're a frightful man," William grinned. "I wouldn't risk getting involved with you." "Of course not. When it comes to solving family problems, I'm second to none," Mrs. Samantha grinned. The next day, William woke up and got himself cleaned up and went to the hospital. He was anxious to get his hands on his wife's property as soon as possible. Amanda had been ill for almost a year. His mistress demanded decisive action, his mother pressured him, and he was the last man standing in all these situations. When he arrived at the clinic, William made his way to the head doctor's office without further ado. Mr. Gregory looked at the visitor questioningly. He had a premonition in his soul that nothing good was to be expected from his visit. "Hello," William smiled. "I'm here to talk to you in confidence. You see, I need a paper to confirm that my wife is incapacitated. Can you draw it up?" "Huh?" "Yes, but on what grounds?" Mr. Gregory smiled. "You realize I didn't conduct this meeting alone. I need my colleagues to sign it." "And how much is needed for a favorable decision?" William understood the chief physician's hint correctly. "And we also need to make sure my wife's GP knows about it. You realize there may be questions for him, and not from me, but from people far less loyal." "I understand. Come back in a couple of days and you'll be all set." He handed William a piece of paper with some strange set of numbers on it. William left the office, left the hospital building, and unfolded the note. The amount and the account number were written there. It was an impressive figure, but there was much more at stake, his own well-being. The chief physician called his son in after this conversation. Alex, coming into his father's office, heard. "Alex, look. From today, everyone who will be interested in Amanda from Ward 6 should know. She is incapacitated. Let's say the lack of oxygen supply has damaged her brain. By the time we got her back to the IQ, it was irreversible. That's a load of bollocks. Who would buy that?" Alex grinned. "What's going on?" "A man asked to have your patient declared incompetent. He promised to pay well, more than we get," Mr. Gregory replied. "Do you understand me, Alex? I'm going to forge documents. You do me a favor, behave yourself and try not to drink so much. Are you on duty today?" "Yeah, it's my shift." "Why?" Alex asked. "No, it's fine. I want to come in and see your patient, how sane she really is, and if anything can be done about it." Alex left the office puzzled. He heard a vague threat in his father's words and shared his concerns with Craig, whom he had dropped in on old friendship. "Listen, remember what Amanda asked me to do? Well, there's something wrong with her again. My dad's stirring things up, and he won't tell me the details." "What is it, Alex?" "What's troubling you?" Craig asked. "He says she'll be legally incompetent. It's like she's brain damaged." "No way," Craig exclaimed. "That's not true. It's a really dark story." "Don't tell anyone about it," Alex asked. "It's a secret, you know." Craig nodded, and in the morning he went to Amanda's room and told her everything. She was frightened, but her brain started thinking straight pretty quickly. Amanda asked, "So he and his mom had a go at my money after all?" "Well, that's to be expected. The days of my husband being a kind guy with a big heart are long gone. I'll have to defend myself. Will you help me, Craig?" "Yeah, what are you planning to do?" the orderly asked. "Here's the phone my lawyer, notary, and deputy's contacts. Call them all, bring them to my room." "All right, well, I'll try and organize it," Craig promised. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine, don't worry about it. Just do it as soon as you can. We've got to get ahead of my husband." "Okay, I will," Craig replied, writing down the numbers Amanda had dictated. "But in general, we have a security clearance. You'll still have to alert the head doctor about visitors." "Well, I'll ask him tomorrow. They said Mr. Gregory will be on his rounds." "I wonder why. Is he going to turn me into a vegetable?" "I don't know, but be careful. There's a reason he's office. He really was a talented doctor once." They said their goodbyes. Craig slipped back to his ward. In the morning, at the entrance, Amanda asked the notary and her deputy with the lawyers to let her in. Mr. Gregory was wary. "Why would you want to do that, dear Mrs. Amanda?" "What do you think?" "I want to mention the hospital in my will. You've done so much for me." Amanda sighed. "I want to make sure I don't die in vain." "But you're not dying yet, are you?" Mr. Gregory grinned. "With visits. Let's see how you feel. And by the way, I want to write a statement that no one but me can make decisions about surgery and other things, so that my relatives don't decide. If I'm unconscious, resuscitate me until I'm dead," Amanda said firmly. "How do I draw up this paperwork?" "I'll draw it up, and they'll bring it to you for you to sign," Mr. Gregory replied. He was very angry. When he finished his rounds, the head doctor went back to his office and started calling the pathology department. Finding that Craig had already taken over, he went to his home, to his room in the communal block. It was the orderly's only accommodation in a dysfunctional old barracks on the first floor, which was accessed by a steep staircase. On reaching the place, Mr. Gregory knocked at the door for a long time. At last it opened, and Craig appeared behind it. "What a lot of people without guards. I wonder what the chief physician of our clinic wants at the home of a mere orderly," he asked his visitor. "We need to talk about the patient. Why do you think she suddenly started demanding notaries, lawyers of some kind?" "How should I know? In our morgue, everyone's quiet and doesn't ask for anything. They don't need lawyers anymore," Craig grinned. "Don't mess with me," said Mr. Gregory threateningly. "Anyway, lad, don't muddy the waters." "Or what?" Craig asked. "Kick me out of my elite position as a morgue attendant?" "Are you getting bold now?" Squinted at the guest. "Don't forget that I can help, but I can also organize problems. Have you forgotten about your mom in the nursing home? Or have you already decided not to take her out of there?" "As if you don't know," Craig said, glaring angrily at the head doctor. "Of course I want to take her, but not to the barracks. She can't do anything here. The stairs are steep, no water, no toilet. But think of your mum, 'cause there's all sorts of staff in nursing homes. I hear Mrs. Olivia's recovering, but let her live a long time, not wait years for her son again. Do you understand me, Craig?" "I do," his opponent muttered, "not a little one." The head doctor left, and Craig went to think. He was well aware that open conflict was not in his interest, especially since one such clash in the past had already led to disaster, literally ruining his life. He closed his eyes and sank into his memories. 7 years ago, he had been a young, promising doctor and the pride of his family. The best clinics were competing to employ him, and he chose the one where his grandfather had once started. And after a year on the job, Craig had interfered in the work of the head doctor, stepped in when he was doing surgery, criticized him, succumbed to ambition. He remembers bursting into the operating theater and shouting, "What are you doing? You've gone completely mad. Who trusted this old man to operate on living people?" "Young man, you better take it easy," Mr. Daniel said indignantly. "I have experience, you know. He's bleeding to death on your table right now." "Can't you see that?" Craig shouted. "That's my patient. I canceled the surgery. His blood counts are critical." "Who are you to decide that?" The chief medical officer was outraged. "Get out of here." They began to struggle. Craig grabbed a scalpel. There was a scuffle. Meanwhile, the man on the operating table died of blood loss. Craig got time served. The head doctor got away with it. The dead patient's relatives demanded huge compensation. Craig's mom sold everything to pay it. And then, while he was serving time, she had a stroke from worry and shame. Their family name was discussed by the entire medical world. Of course, everyone knew the real reasons for the accident. But Craig's career, and that of Mrs. Olivia herself, was ruined. After the stroke, she lay in a room in the barracks for 2 days until the woman was found by neighbors. Precious time was lost. Recovery proceeded with great difficulty. Mrs. Olivia could no longer live on her own and was sent to the home for the disabled. There was still a chance that she might gain relative freedom if she could get a good wheelchair with an electric motor. But Craig had no money for that. On reflection, he decided that it would be a betrayal to Amanda to go along with the head doctor. He genuinely liked her, and he didn't want to hurt the woman. Determinedly, he picked up the phone and started calling the people Amanda had asked him to bring to her. Toward evening, Craig led a procession of 3 men through the morgue entrance into the hospital building. They were the factory lawyer, the notary, and Amanda's assistant, Mr. Matthew. The 3 men made their way to the patient's room. There she drew up and signed the necessary documents, which were certified in full form. Temporarily, Amanda's duties were taken over by her deputy. He even wept at the trust placed in him, but vowed not to abandon her life's work. In her will, Amanda also chose Mr. Matthew as her executor. She also suspended any payments from her accounts and revoked her husband's power of attorney. All financial decisions could only be made by the deputy, whom Amanda trusted implicitly. "I understand. I see everything," said Mr. Matthew. "Don't worry. I'll keep the business. Just get well." "I'll do my best," Amanda smiled. "Everything's going to be all right. Now I'm calling for the factory and for the business in general. Your hubby and his mother-in-law tried to get in. They wouldn't let them in. What a fuss they made. And now they'll probably try to force their way in," Mr. Matthew smiled. "I'll keep in touch with you through Craig," said Amanda. After that, she asked to be left alone with the notary. She wanted to make changes to the will. That took another half hour. By the end of it, an angry head doctor burst into the room. But it was done. His anger wouldn't change anything. The money for the forged incapacity papers had already been paid into the account. And now Mr. Gregory had to explain the situation to the patient's husband, with a slam on the door and a demand to vacate the room. The head doctor left. He had to decide how to proceed. Amanda's visitors streamed towards the exit. She was tired. She was clearly in need of rest. Her breathing was hoarse. Her hands were shaking. The nurse ran to get the ward duty officer to stabilize the patient. In the morning, William discovered that he could no longer freely transfer money from his wife's account. He contacted the bank and learned that its authorization to do so had been withdrawn. Feeling cornered, William rushed to the hospital and demanded to be allowed to see his wife. But she got worse. During the night, Amanda was transferred to intensive care, not without Craig's involvement. Without a clear explanation, William went back to the head doctor's office. There, Mr. Gregory gave him the unpleasant news all at once. "The inquiry. I've prepared a report, but I don't think it will help you. Yesterday, your wife called a notary and a lawyer, signed some papers. I think it's all for nothing now. She's also forbidden you to make decisions about her health. But I'm her husband, and she has no other relatives." William shouted. "What kind of nonsense, or what kind? And where is my money? Give it back." "I can't," replied Mr. Gregory. "I've already shared it with my colleagues. I paid for a result, and now I don't have one," shouted William. "Think of something." "Are you suggesting a radical solution?" said the chief physician. "It costs a lot more." "Just do something," William shouted and walked out, slamming the door. The head doctor exhaled, but immediately a new visitor appeared on the doorstep. This time it was Craig, who had been on night duty with Amanda. He said firmly, "Look, we can't wait any longer. Otherwise, I'll suspect you're deliberately killing the patient. She needs emergency surgery. Be a human being." "So, everyone is mortal," Mr. Gregory said with a chuckle. "Some people just walk away with the help of other people." "Were you paid to kill her?" the orderly asked indignantly. "And what are you going to do if you are? Accuse me verbally." "Except I'm the head doctor and you're the orderly," Mr. Gregory grinned. "There's not going to be any surgery on my ward. That Amanda's only going to come out feet first, right back at you." "Is that so?" Craig grinned and pulled his phone out of his pocket with the recording switched on. "It's all saved in the cloud, and Amanda's notary has access to it. And if anything happens to her, the police will hear what you say." "That's very clear," Mr. Gregory said with a chuckle. "You're good. You've pulled off such a scheme. You've decided to improve your financial condition at the expense of a rich patient. Well done, I approve. We'll do your operation." "I'll do it. We'll do it tomorrow. Tell the ward to get ready." Craig left and Mr. Gregory opened Amanda's chart, found her husband's contact details and dialed the number. "How far have you got, William? I think I have an interesting proposal to solve your problem." One thing Mr. Gregory realized was that the hospital had a doctor with the right profile, but it was Alex, his son, who was a mess. and couldn't cope with the job. He's the one he's put in the plan for the operation tomorrow. Amanda's chances of surviving this intervention were almost non-existent. Alex was known on the ward as the horseman. There was a joke that even the nurse Aunt Dusha could cope with the operation better than the son of the head doctor. All in all, it was the perfect way to get William's money without sharing it with anyone. Satisfied with himself, Mr. Gregory approved the schedule of scheduled operations for the week and left. Amanda was being prepped for surgery. She was very nervous, realizing who would be performing it. But Craig had already made arrangements with Alex the day before and convinced him to rearrange everything. "Alex, the surgery's at 8. Your dad's out of the hospital tomorrow, which means there's a chance of success." "What are you suggesting?" mumbled the son of the head doctor. "What options?" "I'll operate instead of you. We'll take a minimum of staff, only those who have been checked. And that's it. You're on a roll. A talented surgeon saves a nearly hopeless patient. Dad's in shock, and you can prove to him that you're worth something." "What's in it for you?" Alex sensed a catch. "Tell me, what's on your mind?" "It's a very interesting case. And I missed operations in general," answered Craig. "But look, you can operate yourself." "What for?" "I'm out of shape." "Thank you, my father put one unscheduled operation on the schedule." Alex sighed. "But don't let me down." The next morning, Craig was waiting for everyone else in the operating theater. Because of the surgical suit and mask, only his eyes were visible. Amanda saw them before she was anesthetized and calmed down. The nurses even joked that the doctor had a positive effect on the patient's heart rhythms. And then Craig began to operate. Alex leaned against the wall at this time and tried his best not to draw attention to himself. He had just come from a nightclub. The operation lasted 2 hours and was successful. The patient was transferred to the ICU for observation. By evening, Amanda was feeling much better. The chief medical officer was informed of the successful outcome before he arrived at the hospital. The whole department was trying to bring Mr. Alex to his senses so that he could take credit for the success of the operation. He met his father quite awake and refreshed after a few drips. Mr. Gregory was genuinely surprised at the change. A furious William was waiting for him outside his office. Once again, the outcome he wanted had not happened. The man demanded his money back and was very indignant. At that moment, a cleaning lady walked by and revealed Alex's secret. He didn't do the surgery. That's why everything went well. Who did? William wondered. I checked. There are no other surgeons of that profile in the hospital. He's our orderly. He works in the morgue. He's a classmate of Alex's, answered the cleaning lady. Oh, I'm rambling. I don't have time to stand here with you. Wait, don't go. I'll pay, shouted William all the way down the corridor. I don't shout like that. You go out to the back porch. I'll wait for you. I'll make a deal, honey. I need the money. My daughter's pregnant with my third. And if you prove what you said in court, I'll pay you even more, William promised. At that moment, he just wanted to take revenge on everyone, from the surgeon who had successfully performed the operation to the chief doctor. After getting contacts from the nurse, William took action. He filed a formal complaint about people without a license and other rights in the hospital having access to the operating theater. Then he drafted a lawsuit accusing Mr. Gregory and his son of forgery, because they must have known that an orderly would be operating. William's next step was to go to court, seeking compensation from the hospital for moral damages. He modestly kept silent about the fact that he himself had literally persuaded the head doctor to participate in the preparation of his wife's death. A commission from the ministry was sent to the clinic for the duration of the proceedings. All participants in the scandal, including the chief doctor, were suspended from work. But Amanda did not abandon Craig. She was quickly on the mend and was already actively managing the business remotely directly from the hospital ward. And for Craig hired one of the most expensive lawyers. Along the way, she initiated divorce proceedings with her husband. She hoped to deny him the chance to be a plaintiff in the case. For Craig, this trial was crucial in many ways. He perfectly understood that he defends not only reputation in a particular case. The defense lawyer had already gathered evidence to prove that the young doctor had been wrong the first time. Colleagues who had previously kept silent were ready to testify. Many accusations were made in court, but Craig stood his ground. I swore an oath to the doctor and could not allow a person to die on the operating table just because with a scalpel as an understudy, copying notes. Yes, I'm contractually obligated to forfeit my position in practice and serve my sentence. So what? Does that somehow deprive me of skills, talents, qualifications? Don't forget, this is vigilante justice, plaintiff's counsel reminded him. I understand that, but here is a tape where you can hear how the chief doctor, a man who is supposed to defend the interests of patients, suddenly turns into a rascal and someone who is ready to break the law. Are you ready to go under the knife in his department? It was possible to make a fuss, to tell about everything, to make the case public, the judge suggested, and lose valuable time. In this patient's case, because of the deliberate prolongation of all the processes, it was already running into the clock. They literally tried to keep her in the hospital until she died. This is also on the audio tape, which I asked to be admitted into evidence. We've had a patient death episode in the past, the judge reminded us. In this case, there are newly discovered circumstances, interrupted her lawyer. We will seek full rehabilitation of my client with reinstatement and compensation for moral and material damage. That's interesting, the judge replied. Then I declare postponement of the hearing until new circumstances will be studied. The trial was indeed adjourned, but later the verdict was delivered. Craig, who by this time had been fully rehabilitated as a doctor, was acquitted, and only a small disciplinary sanction was imposed. Mr. Gregory and his son were less fortunate. For them, the trial was still ongoing. Sentencing was ahead. The hospital appointed a new chief physician, with whom Craig's grandfather had once been a friend, and he immediately put the talented young doctor in charge of the department. By this time, Amanda had finally recovered and was discharged from the hospital. The first thing she did was to finalize the divorce proceedings and kick her ex-husband and his mother out of the house. And although William and Mrs. Samantha tried to mollify her, they failed. The greedy relatives went away with nothing. Later, through acquaintances, Amanda learned that her ex-husband was left with nothing in his personal life. His mistress left him, and Mrs. Samantha soon fell ill. Her son had to spend hours at her bedside. At Craig's trial, Amanda went in the company of Nurse Emily and other ward staff, and together they celebrated the victory. That same night, Craig confessed his feelings to Amanda. She reciprocated with a warning. You know what I mean. I'm nearly 40. We're hardly going to have kids. If that's okay, I'm ready to spend the rest of my life with you. You know, a child can be adopted. I'm ready to do anything with you, but I also have circumstances, my mom. Now I'll get the compensation, buy a flat, and I can finally hire Kerr. Yeah, we don't have to wait. We can do it now. Take your mom and move into my house. It's suitable for a pram. There's no thresholds and we can hire a carer. Yeah, Emily's the same one who could easily move on to a good salary. Hey, don't poach my staff, Craig laughed. You see, it's important that I do this on my own. Are you willing to wait if you have to? Yes, now I have a new life for it. Amanda smiled, but mind you, you've got a businesswoman with her own peculiarities. I'll get over that. They were married 6 months later. By then, Craig had been compensated and bought a city flat where he could sleep and change clothes. After his tour of duty, he took his mom out of the home for the disabled, provided her with modern rehabilitation equipment, sent her to a sanatorium where even the most difficult patients could get back on their feet. And it worked. After long sessions, Mrs. Olivia made significant progress with her speech. She also started to stand up on her own. She was discharged home with a good chance of further rehabilitation. She was fitted with exercise equipment, and a physiotherapist was hired to help her with her exercises. Amanda talked to her mother-in-law every day, telling her the story of how she and Craig had met. Her mother cried, sometimes taking her daughter-in-law's hand in her own. She was very proud of her son, who was able to save this young, strong and kind woman. Having solved the issues with his mother, Craig seemed to get a second wind. Everything was working out. Everything was getting along. He even managed to go on a refresher course, and on his return, he and Amanda went through foster parenting school. She was ready to be a mom. Craig and Amanda traveled to the orphanage and met with possible candidates for adoption. There was one little girl they were most passionate about. The little girl looked just like her prospective parents. "What's your name?" Craig squatted down next to the girl. "Amanda." The girl smiled like a flower. "Amanda? You know, that's my name too," Amanda smiled. "Would you like me to be your mom? And that kind, handsome uncle over there, Daddy?" The little girl only nodded, and then shyly hid her face in her hands. That finally settled the matter. Amanda and Craig adopted her. The formalities were sorted out pretty quickly, and Mrs. Olivia, with the arrival of the little girl in the house, literally blossomed and began to work even harder on rehabilitation. But it didn't end there. After receiving the birth certificate, where they were registered as parents, Amanda and Craig walked through the park, holding little Amanda's hand. The little girl wouldn't let go of them for a moment. "Oh, I feel sick," Amanda complained. "You're not pregnant, are you?" Craig asked his wife, laughing. They joked. Then Amanda secretly made an appointment for tests and a checkup. The diagnosis was confirmed. A new addition to the family was expected. Although it was not yet known whether it would be a boy or a girl, it was already a miracle for them. The weather outside was damp, a light rain was drizzling down. A strong wind was blowing. In the yard of a dilapidated house, a young girl was washing laundry in a trough with laundry soap. The water had long ago cooled down and her hands were getting tired. When she finished her work, she began to hang the clothes on the ropes. Then she was called by her neighbor, Mrs. Annie. "Hello, Miranda." "Godspeed. I see you've been tidying up since this morning doing the laundry. Good for you. And you've tidied up the yard. I brought you some milk and a couple of raspberry pies I baked myself. Sit down, have a rest, have a snack. You must be tired. You can't be in your condition before labor." The girl was glad to see her visitor and nodded to her. "Hello, Mrs. Annie. Thank you so much. I'd love a treat. Come on in. Why are you so cold?" An old woman came into the house, looked round, complimented her hostess. "You've got a nice place to live. I see you've even washed the curtains." The late Mr. John never dreamed of such cleanliness. He was a lonely man, didn't keep much of an eye on the place, so he neglected the place. "It's a good thing you're here, or some alcoholics would have taken over. They'd be trouble." Miranda was pleased by her neighbor's kind words. She started fussing about, putting the kettle on the stove and looking for brew. During the conversation, Miranda ate pies and treated her neighbor to apples from the abandoned orchard. Mrs. Annie looked at the girl and shook her head. "You're a good girl. You're not lazy. You're a hard worker. Tell me, how did you end up on the street and get pregnant by someone you don't know? You're still a child yourself. Don't you have any relatives? No one to help you. It's going to be hard on the baby." Miranda finished her meal and frowned, shook her head negatively. "I'm an orphan, Mrs. Annie. I grew up in an orphanage. My mom gave me up in the hospital and ran away, so I never even knew a normal family. I had a friend at the orphanage, Alex the Daredevil. He was feared by all the guys. He never gave himself an offense and did not obey anyone. But I was always loved and cared for in a special way. First as a brother, as a friend, and then, in general, we fell in love. It was Alex who encouraged me to run away from the orphanage. He told me so beautifully that there was freedom and real free life behind the iron fence, that we would love each other and travel the world, and no one would scold us and punish us. I was sick of the orphanage myself. I'm used to going everywhere with Alex. Where does he go? Where he goes, I go. So I agreed. And I was 16 then, he was 17. It seemed like we had our whole life ahead of us. But things didn't work out the way Alex promised. Well, we ran away, but we jumped on a train and traveled 1,000 kilometers without a ticket. It seemed so fun and exciting, running away from the controllers and the tracks. That's how we got here. What's next? Nowhere to live, no money. My granddad's friend, Mr. Gary, took us in. I was just a kid then, no job, no papers. So Alex went down the wrong road, started stealing things. Then he was at the market, stealing wallets and phones from passers-by. I didn't know anything for a long time. He lied to me that he went to the market as a part-time worker, unloading a lorry with goods. And I naively believed it. I didn't realize anything for a long time. Eventually, we rented a room. I got a job at a fruit stand selling fruit. I thought we'd always be together. Life seemed to be getting better. The news of my pregnancy shocked both Alex and me. We weren't ready to be parents. I'd only just turned 18. At least I got my passport, although it was a bit of a hassle. I had to lie about losing my birth certificate. We started fighting. I insisted that we get married. The baby needs a father. Alex was pushing me to get an abortion. And then the police came to our house and Alex was rounded up and taken away in front of me. And they searched my room. That's when I found out everything. Even the earrings he gave me were stolen. My fiancé went to jail. He got 5 years, but the owner threw me out of the room. That's how I started to wander. Thanks for letting me live here. It's better than the streets. What do you do now? I don't know. Mrs. Annie, I've regretted running away from the orphanage 100 times. It's just ruined my life. I could have got a place to live as an orphan. And what profession? I'm stupid. That's what I am. The neighbor shook her head, pitying the girl. Yes, you've made a mess of things. What can I say? But you hang on. If you need anything, come in. I'll run, or my grandfather will probably have lost me. After her neighbor had gone, Miranda was upset. Unpleasant memories and gloomy thoughts about the future came back. She got dressed and decided to go to the shop. They were selling food at a discount today. Miranda lingered on the bridge. She leaned her elbows on the railing and looked down. Sometimes she felt so sad and even had bad thoughts. But she did not dare to take such a step and just fell into a daze, looking at the water running below. Suddenly, an expensive car passing by slowed down sharply. A beautiful, expensively dressed lady got out of the car and walked resolutely towards Miranda. The poor girl was even frightened. There was no telling what she had in mind. She might even bully her because of her poor clothes. But the stranger smiled amiably. "Excuse me, are you unwell? I was just passing by and thought you were going to jump. I couldn't help but stop." "Yeah, I was just thinking about it. There's nothing wrong with me. Thank you." The stranger suddenly looked intently at Miranda's slightly protruding belly from underneath her old jumper and suggested, "Look, do you want to earn a large sum of money and do nothing? Well, almost nothing. My name is Brooke, by the way. What's yours?" "I'm Miranda. I don't know what you're talking about. It's not like that. You don't just suddenly get offered money." "I don't like this. Although I must admit, I could use every penny right now. You see, I'm pregnant," Miranda said. Brooke began to explain to her patiently. "That's right, you're pregnant. That's exactly what I need. You see, I have a fiancé, a very rich and successful businessman, and we're getting married. And I lied to him about being pregnant. I even put on a belly pad. All delayed with a visit to the doctor, but my fiancé lost patience and demands that I bring him the results of ultrasound and register. And what will I charge him? You see, my deception will be exposed, and then there will be no wedding. William won't forgive me for lying like this. I mean, you and I look exactly alike. Look at our hair color and height and figure. I want you to go to a fee-for-service ultrasound clinic tomorrow instead of me. My fiancé picked it out. You're not risking anything. I'll give you my documents. You'll take the test, get the results, give them back to me. That's the job. And I'll pay you handsomely for it. Do you agree?" Miranda was shocked by what she heard. "Why do you want to do all this? Because sooner or later your fiancé will realize that you're not pregnant. And then what?" Brooke waved away. "What do you care? I'll say I lost the baby, and that's the end of it. I just want him to marry me, and then we'll see. I'll think of something. So what's up? Do you want the money? Or should I look for another candidate near the antenatal clinic?" Miranda hesitated. On the one hand, she knew she was being dragged into something bad, but on the other hand, she was on the edge. There was so much to buy for the baby. So why not go for this madness? Where else could she get a job like this? And the girl nodded. "Okay, I'll do it. Where and what time should I come over tomorrow? And I need an advance. I don't want to be cheated. Brooke laughed. I see you're not a bad guy. Here you go. Brooke pulled out the money, and that's just the deposit. You'll get the rest when you give me the results. And now the most important thing is the difference between you and me, you understand? Get in the car. Let's go. We need to get you cleaned up. Otherwise, they won't accept such simple things in an elite clinic. Our whole plan will fail. Brooke put Miranda in the car and drove her to the spa. There, in a couple of hours, the girl was transformed. She had never felt so blissful from the various masks, facial massages, and pleasant treatments. She got a neat manicure and a haircut like Brooke. And when she walked out of the shop in a beautiful long dress and booties, even the customer was delighted. Nothing reminded her of her past life now. Miranda felt as if she had entered another dimension. She didn't recognize herself in her new appearance. There, now it's in order. The rich woman was pleased. Here's the address. Meet me at the clinic gate tomorrow at 9. I'll give you my papers. That's it. I hope everything will work out. A wedding and a happy, trouble-free life are at stake. Back in her ramshackle house, Miranda felt sad. This is the end of the fairy tale. She slept badly, tossing and turning, nervous. She wondered how it would go tomorrow. What if the doctor suspects something? How would I get out of it? But on the other hand, this is a good opportunity to do a comprehensive examination and learn everything about your baby. A, be what it will be. On the morning of the appointment, Miranda took Brooke's paperwork and walked to the clinic. Everything went smoothly at the front desk. The receptionist didn't ask too many questions and gave her a ticket to the ultrasound room. But when Miranda entered the room, she gasped. There next to the doctor sat some nice, well-groomed middle-aged man. He looked intently at the girl and smiled. Good afternoon, I'm here for an ultrasound. Brooke Brown is scheduled for 9:30, she said timidly. That's good. Please come in. Strip down to your waist and lie down on the couch, the doctor replied. You may keep your shoes on, the doctor said. Miranda was taken aback and was about to ask the stranger to come out, when suddenly the stranger said in a calm voice, Honey, what are you doing? You're looking at me as if you've seen me for the first time. It's me, William, your fiancé. I wanted to surprise you. I'm here early. I can't wait to see our baby. And I see my surprise has been a success. Miranda felt nervous and realized she was in trouble. She wanted to run away, but the man was ahead of her and closed the door from the inside. Then he grabbed the fake bride firmly by the arm and said sharply, Now tell me, who are you? And why are you holding my Brooke's ID? What kind of circus is this, anyway? Miranda became completely confused and cried out in fear. Confused, she explained everything as it happened. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I just needed the money badly. So I agreed. That woman met me by chance. So she offered to go to the ultrasound instead of her. I'm really pregnant. And my fiancé's in prison. And I'm struggling to make ends meet. I live in an abandoned house. Is that how Brooke wanted to tie you down and marry you? I'm so embarrassed. Can I go now? Please let me go. William could see that this poor, confused girl wasn't lying. Brooke must have really worked her over. He replied peacefully. Wait, since you're here, then have them give you an ultrasound. The appointment is paid for anyway, and I'll at least look at someone else's happiness. And then you can go. You give Brooke what you owe her, and I'll deal with her at home. I won't involve you. After all, it's really not your fault. Miranda exhaled and lay back on the couch. The doctor was running the probe over her abdomen and showing on the screen. Okay, 18 weeks, you're having a boy. Look, your heart is beating. There are no abnormalities. Amniotities is enough, blood flow is not disturbed. The pregnancy is progressing normally. Everything's fine. So take care of yourself and get ready to be a mummy. All the best to you. I'll give you the report now, the doctor said. Miranda was about to leave at last, but William called out to her again and suddenly suggested, Listen, Miranda, your money is tight, but come and work for me in the garment factory. I'll find you a simple sit-down job because we're short of people, we're completely swamped. Here's my card. If you think about it, give me a call. The girl did not know how to thank the man and immediately replied, "And there is nothing to think about. I agree. Tomorrow I will come to register. Thank you very much. And again, I'm sorry I agreed to participate in this scam." Miranda ran out of the clinic like a scolded woman. Brooke was waiting for her at the agreed-upon location. She asked her impatiently, "How did it go? Tell me, don't drag it out. Here, take this. I earned the money." Miranda handed over both the documents and the ultrasound report and only hastily replied, "The baby is fine. I don't need any money. I'm going to go. I have to go. Excuse me." Miranda ran without looking back. Her mind was in chaos. She'd done everything right, but she hadn't told Brooke the truth, that her fiancé knew about her lies. How could she tell if the businessman was so kind and offered her a good job? How could she not honor his terms? "Yes, I'm in a bind," thought the girl. It was only at home that she finally breathed freely. Brooke twisted at her temple. What a crazy woman, living poor, and she didn't take the money. That's it. Now I have irrefutable proof that I'm pregnant. William will be delighted, and the wedding will be soon. She flew home as if on wings and was surprised that the groom was already home. He was usually at work at this hour. The woman immediately decided to share the news and with a solemn look handed him the ultrasound result. "Honey, I've been to the doctor. Look at this, the baby is fine. 18 weeks, so we can't wait to get married, or I won't be able to fit into any dress soon. What happened to your face? Aren't you happy?" she asked. William suddenly seized her wrists, gave her a painful squeeze, and at the same time shouted, "Well, you're a cunt, Brooke. Do you take me for a fool at all? Do you want me to tell you whose ultrasound result this is? Miranda Morris. I was really surprised to see her in the doctor's office with your paperwork." He, taking off his jumper, continued, "I even wonder how you faked a pregnancy." And he ripped the clothes off the bewildered bride with force and saw the false belly. The man grabbed his head and screamed, "Ugh, what an abomination. Why? Tell me, why did you set all this up? Why did you drag a stranger into your play? What did you want? And then what? Would you get someone else's child or something? Answer me something. I want to understand how your sick brain came up with this crazy idea. Are you crazy?" Brooke sobbed and tried to justify herself. "Well, I'm sorry, honey, please. Yes, I lied to you about being pregnant. I mean, we had a big fight back then, and I was so scared that I would lose you forever. But then I didn't know how to tell you the truth. I love you, William, and I want to be your wife." The man was shocked. He clenched his fists and went at Brooke. "Get out of my house immediately and take your junk with you. You're a monster, Brooke, and you and I have nothing to do with each other anymore. I don't want a wife who lies and tries to tie me down with a false pregnancy. It's unbelievable. I don't want to know you anymore. I mean, what kind of family do you have? And you grow up to be such a bitch." Brooke was frantically packing and getting angry. "You're such a bitch, Miranda, because you knew I'd get in trouble at home and you didn't say anything. That's why you didn't take the money. Wait a minute, you beggar. My tears will be poured out for you. I'll give you a life you'll regret." William and Brooke broke up. The man did not want to hear about reconciliation, and the bride canceled the wedding. Miranda went to her new job. The shop was bright and clean. The team was good. She was welcomed with friendliness, sat down to punch buttons. The work was sedentary and not difficult. The girl liked everything. She was happy that before giving birth she would be able to earn money for everything needed for the baby. She wasn't so scared now. William looked at the new employee, asked the foreman about her work, and was satisfied. He had taken her for a reason. The girl turned out to be diligent and hardworking. She fulfilled the plan. She was praised. A month passed. Miranda was no longer sad. Life slowly got better. Now the girl had money for clothes and food. One day she came home from work and saw a terrible picture. Her dilapidated house had burned to the ground. Neighbors were standing around. A fire engine was dousing the fire. Miranda squeezed her eyes shut. She couldn't believe that now she had no place to live again. All her belongings were burned. At least she had her passport with her. Her neighbor, Mrs. Annie, wailed. What misery in this village. It attracts bad luck to itself. How can it be? Why should I be surprised? It's an old house. Maybe the wiring shorted out. How are you going to go back to the streets? Let's go to my place. You can't go outside, and the nights are cold. Come to my place, you'll spend the night, and then we'll see. Where would you go with a belly? Miranda cried inconsolably. Once again her life was ruined. She wandered after the old woman. She fed her and put her on a cot. The girl heard Mrs. Annie's husband swearing softly. Have you gone mad, Annie? Why did you bring that pregnant girl here? Is she going to live here now? It's probably her own fault the house burned down. Why do we need her problems? We don't have much money and a lot of illnesses ourselves. She can stay the night and then she can go. She can make her own way. Mrs. Annie shouted at her husband. Oh, be quiet. Don't shout. She'll hear you. I feel sorry for Miranda. She's a good girl. We won't be poor for a bowl of soup. The guest cried quietly. She did not know how to go on living, and she could not sit on the neighbors' necks for long. The next day, Miranda was not herself at work. Tears were choking her, and she shared her grief with one of her co-workers. Everyone sympathized with her, and the news that the new girl's house had burned to the ground reached William a couple of days later. He immediately summoned Miranda to his house. The frightened girl timidly entered the principal's office and stared at him bewildered. William started the conversation. Miranda, why didn't you tell me at once what trouble you were in? That you have no place to live, that you're wandering around in the neighborhood. You're in your condition. You can't wander anymore. I don't think about yourself, think about the baby. So I'm taking you on as a patron. You'll live in my mansion. Don't think anything bad. I won't lay a finger on you. I just want to help you as a human being. So get ready, finish your shift, and we'll go. I'll put you up on the first floor. It's a cozy room there. The girl looked dumbfounded at the principal. William, this isn't a joke. But why do you need all this? I've got everything burnt down, haven't I? One passport in my pocket is all that's left. I'm nothing to you. I'm ashamed to sit on your neck. It's uncomfortable for me. The man frowned. Well, for one thing, you were the one who helped me open my eyes to the lying bride, so we are no longer strangers. Secondly, you're expecting a child, and I can't just pass by your distress. Things will work out, you'll see. I didn't become an entrepreneur right away, either. I came up from the bottom. And on my way, there were also good people who were kind to me and helped me in many ways. So I just want to help you. That's all. Miranda cried and didn't know how to thank the principal. William, you're just saving me right now. I was already desperate, to be honest, and I still don't understand how or why the house burned down. I was going to work. Everything was fine. I came to the ashes. Can I help you with the chores or in the kitchen? It'll be easier for me. Thank you. You don't meet such kind people nowadays, Miranda said. William took Miranda to his house, put her up, bought her some clothes and treated her as a friend without any subtext. He himself did not understand why this poor girl had touched him so much. After all, he hadn't been so sensitive before. All career, business, the cycle of events. But suddenly he saw people barely making ends meet. And for some reason he wanted to help Miranda. The girl was at a loss, exhausted. She might do something terrible or disappear into the street. She was still young, still had a lot to live for. And Miranda reminded him a lot of his dead sister. Probably. That's why her fate touched his soul so much. William was not lazy and learned from the fire expert about the causes of the fire in the house where Miranda lived. And he was shocked, he said, most likely arson. And then the man was struck with a terrible hunch. What if Brooke was getting back at Miranda? I mean, she'd been cursing her as she left. And now she's periodically stalking him, hoping that something else might work out between them. Brooke was sitting at the bar at the same time, nervously finishing her third glass of cocktail. There was a restlessness in her soul. She had never been able to accept defeat. No one had ever left her like this before. So what if I lied a little to speed up the wedding? So now what? Everything's fallen apart because of it. But instead of blaming herself, Brooke was angry at Miranda. She couldn't forgive her for keeping silent. She thought that girl was the one who had ruined everything. Some random suitor was sitting across from her, showering her with compliments, but it only annoyed the woman. And then her mobile phone rang. "Good evening, Brooke. This is your fiance's accountant, Terry. I've got some news I wanted to tell you." I nearly fell out of my chair when I heard it. "We got a new girl here, Miranda, orphan, works in the sewing room. Anyway, her house burned down. So our director put her up with him today," the woman said into the receiver. "Who told you that?" "I won't say, but the information is correct. We're all shocked. The girl is poor as a church mouse, and she's pregnant." Brooke even turned white with anger, pressed her lips together and thought, "Look at her, what a bitch. Pretending to be a sheep, crying, and then sneaking into William's house. She probably jumped into bed, even though she was pregnant. But I'm not going to let it go. And William's good too. So some foreign girl is now worth more to him than a proper bride. Who the hell does he think he is? We've got to do something and get this imposter out of here. I'll do my best, but I'll get it done." Meanwhile, Miranda was settling into William's mansion. She was not used to such luxury at first. The guest tried to be useful, helping the cook, cleaning. She also took an interest in embroidery and prepared a gift for her benefactor. She decided to embroider his portrait with beads. Pregnancy proceeded normally, and in due time Miranda gave birth to a son, Justin. William was so happy, took her from the hospital, bought everything necessary for the baby, and often came to the girl's room to admire the baby. The man wanted children very much, but his personal life was not going well, and this desire was postponed for later. William furtively watched Miranda, saw how much she loved her son and cared for him, and sighed to himself. Deep down, he liked Miranda very much. They talked a lot now, but both of them were afraid to talk about the most important thing, their feelings. "You and I are alike, Miranda," William once said. "I too was brought up in an orphanage until I was 10. I don't know anything about my parents. I had a little sister, Betty, and you look a lot like her. But the little one died. She was born with a weak heart. That grief really got to me, and I withdrew. I didn't talk to anyone. But I was lucky. I was adopted by an older woman, our carer. It just sort of worked itself out." William continued to talk about his life. "At first, Mrs. Charlotte would just take me to her house at weekends. I was drawn to her because she was kind and gentle and gave me the warmth I was missing. And one day I said to her, 'Aunt Charlotte, can I call you Mum? Don't leave me, okay?' She cried, held me close, and we never parted again. When I started living with my foster mum, everything in my life got better. I finished school with a medal. My mum helped me to study at university. She always protected me. I still remember her with love. After university, I decided to go into commerce. I started with small trade. It was hard, but little by little I saved money and opened a mini atelier. At first, there were only 3 workers, and those Mum's female acquaintances, and old sewing machines. But gradually the business went on. Now I have my own sewing factory. But my mum passed away 5 years ago. She had asthma. I hardly survived the loss. I couldn't live in our flat with her. Everything reminded me of her. I sold everything and bought this mansion. I'm working, I'm trying. You see, it's important that someone believes in you and loves you unconditionally. Mum was that person, and I still miss her." Miranda exhaled. "Lucky you, William. No one ever really loved me. I was like that to everyone, never wanted me. I loved Alex very much, and I thought he loved me too. I guess I love Justin the most. It makes me feel good. And I'm so grateful to you guys. No one's ever done so much good for me. You are a very good person and a man of prominence, really, and you will definitely find your happiness. I sincerely wish you that," Miranda said. The man objected. "Why do you keep shouting at me? I'm only 8 years older than you. I'm not an old man yet. Let's use the first name because it's a bit strange. We live in the same house, we're not strangers." "Thank you for your kind words, Miranda. It's my pleasure, but you should know that if you need help, or just to talk, I'm always here for you. I think I'm the kind of person who will love you just the way my mom used to love me." 6 months passed. Justin was growing up, and Miranda started taking home orders for part-time work. She didn't want to be a burden, Old hardships and sorrows were slowly being forgotten. Miranda even blossomed and cheered up. The iron gates of the prison opened, and the tall guard bellowed. "Alex Willis, free to go. I hope prison has taught you something, and you won't come back to us." Alex nodded and strode to the bus stop. He carried an old traveling bag on his shoulder, and in his pocket he had a criminal record and some money he'd earned in prison. Where to go? What to do next? Alex didn't know, and that scared him. Sitting in prison, the guy often remembered Miranda, thought how she was, what was wrong with her. Where was she now? Had she given birth or not? After all, she has no one but him. Prison really sobered the guy up. Burned convicts, horrible food, hard labor. Alex regretted many times that he had stolen and was determined not to come back here ever again. He stood at the bus stop and looked at the buses passing by, thinking, where to start, where to go. And then a cool car pulled up and a blonde woman of incredible beauty opened her window. "Are you Alex Willis?" That's right. Why?" "Get in, I was just on my way to see you. I have some important business to attend to." The guy even whistled. He was lucky to have such a lady paying attention to him. I wonder what she wanted from him. The man sat down in the salon. It was warm and comfortable, smelling of perfume. The stranger held out a graceful hand with a chic manicure and introduced herself. "My name is Brooke. Although you don't need to know my name. You don't know me, Alex. And I don't really want to hang out with you either, to be honest. But you and I have something in common, so we're going to have to work together temporarily. Question number 1. Do you know Miranda? You two have a child together, if I'm not mistaken. You miss her, don't you? Do you want to see her?" Alex's eyes immediately lit up. "Of course I want to see Miranda. She's my first love. She and I have been together since we were kids. But when I went to jail, she was pregnant. That's true. Do you know anything about her? Where can I find her?" Brooke smiled predatorily. "You bet I do. Your Miranda is my rich fiance's fiancée and now lives in his mansion, and she forgot all about you. How's that for news like that? Do you think it's fair? Surely she didn't visit you in prison?" The boy soured and mumbled. "I did bad things to her too. I talked her into an abortion myself. I didn't want that baby. And when I went to jail, she was left on the street without a penny. So if she found happiness with someone else, it's probably better that way." The cunning woman didn't give up and continued to press. "Hey, you sissy, is it possible to give up your happiness? One must fight for one's love. Personally, I'm not going to give your Miranda my William." "Alex, that's ridiculous. What can I offer her? I'm a convict without a penny. No property, no place to live. Where am I going to bring her and the baby? What will we live on? I still love her." But she began to tell him. "Well, here we come to the point. That's what my offer is. Look, I'll rent you a flat, pay for 6 months in advance, and I'll throw the same amount of money for life until you get on your feet. And in return, you do whatever you want, but get Miranda out of my fiance's house. And then it's up to me how I make up with him." "I see." Alex jumped with joy. What an offer. All problems are solved at once. Of course he agreed, and they hit it off. The same day, Brooke rented a cheap one-bedroom on the outskirts of the city, bought a couple of decent things, and he went to William's house a couple of days later. Miranda was just walking with her son in the yard. The toddler was minding his own business, and she was showing him toys. When the doorbell rang, Miranda thought of the delivery man. William had warned her in the morning. But when the woman saw Alex on the doorstep, she just gasped and recoiled. "Alex, they let you out, didn't they? You were given 5 years. Why did you come here? How did you even know where I live?" The boy admired Miranda. She'd gotten so much prettier in that time. Pregnancy and childbirth had done her good. She'd put on a little weight, and there was a blush on her cheeks. Everything stirred in his soul, and love flared up with renewed vigor. He answered, "Hello, my love. I got out on parole, under amnesty. I think about you all the time. I miss you so much. Let me at least give you a hug. Why are you standing there like a stranger?" The guy hugged the girl and kissed her passionately. Miranda immediately collapsed in his arms. Everything swam in front of her eyes. She still loved her Alex. Her son in the pram started to cry, and that sobered the woman. She immediately pushed the boy, sharply told him, "Easy, Alex, I'm nothing to you. You never married me, and you didn't want a son either. You've been stealing and hiding. Go away, please. We have different paths now, you understand. I want a normal family, a man to be a protector, a strong shoulder. And what about you?" The guy got angry. "So it's true. You're sleeping with him." "Yeah, with that man who took you in. Here he is, so he's your strong shoulder. What about our love? I mean, we dreamed we'd be together forever. Miranda, I love you. Think about it. Believe me, I've changed. There's no going back. I've got a flat, I've got money. Let's try to start over again. I'm begging you. I need you, sweetheart. Let me at least see my son. Don't drive me away." Miranda reluctantly led him into the pram, tears dripping from her eyes. How little Justin looked like Alex, with his ears and potato nose. She said quietly, "I haven't cheated on you, Alex, ever. And it really hurts me that you think that about me and listen to other people's gossip. William is a wonderful man. I've never met anyone like him. I'm very grateful to him for everything, and I'm not coming back to you. I'm sorry." Alex left with nothing. Brooke was already waiting for him in the courtyard of his new flat and immediately started asking him questions. "So, did you convince your fiancée? When is she moving in?" "No, she won't. I showed her my son. He's a carbon copy of me. He's mine." She melted right away, but then she suddenly got stubborn. She said she didn't believe me anymore. She asked me where I got the money from. She probably thinks I'm stealing again. When I saw Miranda, I was lost. I can't be without her. She's mine, full stop. What am I supposed to do now?" Brooke was nervous. "Okay, you need to get a good job right away so she'll trust you. I've got a place I've got in mind, a car repair shop not far from here. They'll take you even with a criminal record. I'll make a deal, you work for a week, then go back to her. Beg, tell her you love your son. If you don't fulfill your conditions, you'll be out of this flat and you won't get any more money. So get a move on, you Romeo." Brooke did help him get a job. Unofficially, but the pay was generous. The guy was getting tired from the job, hands black with dirt. The work was tedious and uninteresting, and he was used to getting paid in other ways. But for Miranda's sake, he was willing to put up with it. He wanted her back so badly. He was obsessed with the idea. A week later, Alex came to Miranda's house again, with a bouquet of daisies. She had loved them since childhood, and a bag of toys for her son. Miranda was surly. "Come on, Alex. I told you not to come here. This is a punishment. Hear me? I'm not coming back. I'm sorry. I've got to get back to the house. Justin will wake up soon, and he'll be scared some more." The boy became furious and threw the bouquet against the ground, yelling, "Also, but if you don't want to see me, I have a right to see my son. Let go. Where's Justin?" "You shouldn't do that, Miranda. I work at a car service now. I don't steal, and I love you very much. So you're just looking for money and a daddy." Miranda started to argue, too. Alex pushed her away and tried to get in. William came out to the noise. He was aware that Miranda's ex-boyfriend was out of jail. The woman complained that she didn't want to go back to her old life. She couldn't dissuade Alex. The man shouted, "What's going on here? Young man, get out of here. Miranda, go inside and don't be afraid of anything. I'll be right there." Alex flared up. "Why are you meddling in our life, uncle? Are you interested in young girls? Miranda is my fiancée. We were made for each other, all right. And Justin is my son, and you're standing in my way." William was a man of manners and restraint and calmly replied, "Look, young man, I don't have a relationship with Miranda, if that's what you mean, and I don't enslave her. She can leave the house at any time. But after all, she doesn't want to see you. So go away and don't scandalize, or you'll get yourself into trouble." Alex perked up. Are you threatening me or something? William frowned. Just giving you a warning for now. But if you don't understand nicely, I'll have to explain more clearly. Now goodbye. William slammed the door shut and went inside. Alex walked away. He was angry and hated this rich man who stole Miranda from him. But as soon as he rounded the corner, the light faded and there was a lingering darkness. Miranda hadn't been herself all night. After her conversation with Alex, a part of her was still in love with him. But in her mind, she knew that if they came back together, everything would be the same as it had been before: anxiety, uncertainty. And William was frowning, not himself. The woman had bathed the baby and was just putting him to bed when the doorbell rang again. I wish it wasn't Alex, Miranda thought with horror. But 2 policemen entered the house, introduced themselves, and dumbfounded everyone. Citizen William, you are being held on suspicion of an attempt on the life of Citizen Alex Willis. He's currently in intensive care in a coma. Your neighbor saw you threatening him with violence, and half an hour later he was found around the corner with a severe head injury. Get dressed, come with us. William was shocked. Miranda, it wasn't me, I swear. We just talked, that's all. Trust me, it will all be cleared up soon, and I'll be released. This is some kind of monstrous misunderstanding. The woman wept and could not believe what she was hearing. William was taken away, and she began to collate the facts. William had been gone for exactly 10 minutes after his meeting with Alex, and then he'd been frowning all evening, not saying a word. What if it really was him? Poor Alex. What if he dies? William would be locked up for a long time. I'm a disaster for people, Miranda thought to herself. The next day, she went to check on Alex at the hospital. She was not allowed into the intensive care unit, but was told that his condition was stable and that she would call him if he got better. The girl was only allowed to look at him through the glass. The sight was horrible. A pile of twisted wiring, life support system connected. The boy was as helpless and miserable as he had been when he fell off the high swing in the orphanage yard as a child. Memories came flooding back to Miranda. She cried. She hadn't forgotten William either. She was terribly ashamed that her personal problems had landed him in such trouble. She scraped together all the savings she'd managed to save in 6 months and hired a lawyer. She prayed that William wasn't the attacker, though she wasn't entirely sure. Brooke rejoiced. Her plan had worked. Everything had worked out perfectly. The cunning woman, having learnt that William was in the detention center and Alex in intensive care, and even in a coma, began the most important thing. She brazenly showed up at William's mansion and started kicking Miranda and the baby out. Well, darling, here we are face to face. You're a nobody here, so get out of here. I'm giving you 12 hours to get the hell out of here. Otherwise, I'll get your father involved, and you'll have to explain why you're living in someone else's house without registration, Brooke said. Miranda was taken aback. So you're nobody to William either. Why are you bossing me around? Or do you feel like you own the place? With the landlord in trouble, Brooke had gone wild. Her eyes burned with mad fire. She swung the porcelain vase and shouted, "Oh, you're talking like that? Have you got the courage to speak? I will destroy you and your offspring." She grabbed Justin. He got scared and started crying. Miranda was scared to death for her son and begged, "I'll leave right now. Stop it. Give me the baby, please." Brooke laughed. "That's better. And remember, you show up in this house again, or anywhere near William at all, something bad will happen to your baby. I will not leave you alone. If your Alex wakes up, go to him and live happily ever after. And forget about William. He's not your hero. He's mine. He just hasn't realized it yet." Miranda nodded her head and agreed with everything, just as long as she didn't piss off a more distraught Brooke. She packed up the baby, grabbed her suitcase, and left. She used the last of her money to rent a small room. But what to do next? She didn't know. She didn't want to go back to Alex. Everything inside burned out, and there was no more that love, only bitter residue and disappointment. Now, having become closer to William, Miranda realized that this was exactly what a real man should be: decent, able to solve problems, not create them. Such a man would not lie, dodge, promise something he could not fulfill. She was very worried about William and didn't know how else to help him get out of prison. He didn't deserve this. He was only trying to protect her. A week passed. The hospital called to say that Alex had regained consciousness and had been moved to the general ward. The woman immediately grabbed her son and rushed there. Alex was overjoyed and shown. "Beloved, you came to see me. Thank you. Give me Justin. Please, my darling son, don't cry. It's me, your daddy." Miranda asked sharply. "Alex, tell me honestly who attacked you." "I don't believe it was William. He couldn't have done that." The boy didn't bother to lie. "That Brooke is a real bitch. She heard all about you chasing me away again, and as soon as I rounded the corner, she slapped me. She's a sick, crazy person. Alex, you have to tell the police the whole truth. It wasn't William's fault. I'm the reason he got hurt. Let Brooke answer for everything." Alex immediately took stock of what was being said and gave it out. "I agree, but only on one condition. We'll live together again, get married. I want a family, a son to raise, to love. I'm different now, Miranda. Trust me. And if you refuse again, William will be in trouble with the law. So choose. We've been together since we were kids. I don't want anyone but you." "Honey, yes, I made a mistake. I took a wrong turn. But prison fixed me. No more criminal behavior, I swear. I don't think you're taking his father away from him. We're one, Miranda. And the sooner you realize that, the better." The woman knew it was blackmail. But she couldn't leave William in distress. She had no right, and for his sake she agreed to be with Alex, even though she knew in her heart that they were no longer one. Their tender youthful love and friendship were long past, and nothing good would come of it. But a deal's a deal. Miranda moved into Alex's rented flat. William was released and Brooke was taken into custody. At first Alex really tried. He went to work at the car service, tired, tried to babysit Justin, and tried to get close to Miranda again. But for her, it was torture. She no longer felt anything for her fiancé, and every night she wished that morning would come sooner. As soon as Alex went to work, her soul was torn back to William. The girl was absolutely miserable. Now William came home. The maid told him about Brooke kicking Miranda out. The man was very angry. It was beyond the limit. He started calling immediately. "Miranda, thank you for the lawyer, for worrying about me. I'm really touched, honestly. Brooke did a terrible thing. She had no right to kick you out. Where are you now? Let me come over. Come back. I never thought I'd miss you and Justin so much. The house is empty without you." Miranda's heart hammered frequently. She had finally heard such a long-awaited confession. If only she could, she would immediately run back to the place where she felt so good and safe, where she was cared for and loved. And quietly she answered, swallowing her tears, "I'm sorry, William, but I can't go back. I've reconciled with Alex. We've already applied for the registry office. The wedding is in a month. I'm the one who should be apologizing to you. I'm the one who got you into this mess in the first place. And I also want you to know that you are the best man in the world. I've never met anyone like you." "Who's calling? Who are you so in love with?" Alex shouted. "What am I missing?" Miranda startled and immediately pressed the call's reset button. A short beep went off. The guy freaked out and squeezed her hand painfully. "For this to be the first and last time. Get that businessman out of your head. He helped you, and that's fine. Or have you forgotten our deal? I'm Justin's father and your future husband, okay?" Miranda startled and cried. Alex had never spoken to her like that before, never yelled at her. Now he was getting tough, completely changed. The guy realized that he had overstepped his bounds and immediately started hugging and kissing the girl, asking for forgiveness. "Forgive me, darling, I'm just very jealous of you because I love you. You are only my girl. Do you hear? I won't give you to anyone. Come to me, sweetheart." Alex began to cover his bride's neck with kisses, and she endured, her tears choking her. Luckily, Justin became cranky and cried loudly, calling for his mom. The woman immediately pushed Alex away and went to the child. William, on the other hand, immediately understood everything after the call. From her intonation, she had such a murdered, doomed voice, he thought. Hey, girl. What mistake are you making again? Your Alex won't change and everything will go round again, stealing and lying. You're a mess. But I have no right to interfere. It's your decision, even if it's wrong. What's wrong with me? Why did I think about Miranda day and night, even in prison? Why do I still run to the nursery and want to cry at the empty baby's lullaby? I've never been that sensitive, have I? I think I've truly fallen in love. What to do with all this now? In the meantime, the young couple's relationship had fallen apart. Alex started to disappear again at night. He said it was an urgent order, car repairs. But Miranda didn't believe him anymore, and he started to bring a lot of money. She should be happy, but she remembered all too well how it had ended. Last time she had tried to talk frankly with her fiancé. Well, why did you order such an expensive restaurant? Why this glamour and show? We still have no home, no car, and you are wasting such money. You didn't even ask my opinion. Where did you get all that money from? Aren't you afraid? Tell me honestly, you haven't started doing something illegal again, have you? The boy's eyes flickered. He too hastily, cheerfully replied, I don't make up nonsense and don't get yourself worked up. You like to complicate things without thinking about anything. Relax. Or rather, think about pleasant things. We'll buy you the prettiest dress and choose the rings together, all for you. And the money? Come on, it's just paper. What's there to spare? Alex still avoided a direct answer and hurriedly turned the conversation to another topic. But Miranda's heart was uneasy. She knew that look and demeanor of his too well. He sounded insincere. The woman decided to secretly call the mysterious car service, in which allegedly her flatmate works day and night. She politely asked, Good afternoon. Could you put Alex on the phone, please? I really need it. But she was stunned. He doesn't work here. He quit 3 months ago, so I can't help you. Miranda was stunned. Everything inside her suddenly turned upside down. She sat down in the chair and cried bitterly. The wedding was already a week away. It turned out that Alex was doing something secret again. How annoying. He wouldn't tell the truth. Even if you tortured him, he would lie until the end. Miranda sobbed and thought, Where am I going? I'm putting my head in the noose. But what kind of family is he? He's already in trouble. Where did he get the money from? God, I'm so fed up. Why did I get involved with him in the first place? I have to drag my son into all this, Miranda thought. Alex had changed so much since prison. He had some outbursts of aggression, and he'd already played with the son. Now if he cries, if he has a fever, if he's teething, all the problems only annoy him. Raising the child is hard work, and Alex isn't ready for it. Shouting to the whole world that he is a father and actually being one, it turned out to be different things. And Justin senses his nervousness and doesn't want to play with him for long. It just doesn't seem to be working out. There's no happiness in their family, that's all. How about I drop everything and run away before it's too late? But I'd be setting William up. Alex won't forgive me and he'll take revenge. What a mess I've gotten myself into, she pondered. Whatever happens. William didn't waste any time either. He realized for himself that he wanted to tie his life only with Miranda and decided to make a decisive move, as in chess. But so that everything would be clear. The deciding day arrived. From the morning, Miranda got up in a bad mood. She had nightmares and a headache. She reluctantly went to make herself pretty and dressed. 2 hours later, she looked gorgeous. A long snow-white dress with a train, beautifully intricate hair and delicate makeup. Little Justin was dressed up too. He was so funny in a baby suit with a boatie. The groom arrived, rented a limousine, and they went to the registry office. All the way Alex was shining with happiness and told everything about where they would go on holiday after the wedding and how they would live in prosperity. And Miranda was getting more and more scared. She saw the groom cheats and is not ashamed, and she wondered where he'd gotten himself into this time, and when will he be caught? The important lady was broadcasting loudly. Is your desire to marry free, sincere and reciprocal in good faith? Do you enter into marriage? Please answer, you groom. Alex, without hesitation, shouted, Yes. Miranda, on the other hand, wanted to shout, "No, I don't want to marry that man." But she had a lump in her throat and quietly replied, "Yes." It was time to seal the marriage with signatures. And then the unbelievable happened. The door of the wedding hall swung open and William flew in like a bullet. He literally pushed the registrar aside and said into the microphone, "Miranda, sweetheart, stop. You're making a huge mistake. Your fiancé has gone back to crime. He recently robbed a big official. He was repairing his car in a car service and found a bank card in the salon. And while the official came to his senses, Alex managed to transfer a huge sum to other accounts. Not by himself, of course. He was helped by cyber criminals. The trio were fully confident they wouldn't be exposed, but the police figured it all out. And now your fiancé is going to go to jail again, this time for a long time." Alex jerked and tried to run, but the police were waiting for him outside the registry office and led him straight to the police station. Miranda ran after him, caught up with him, pulled off his veil, threw the ring in his face and shouted, "It's over between us. Don't ever come into my life again, and I won't let you anywhere near my son. You lied to me again. There's no fixing you." Alex shouted in his heart as well. "Go back to your rich man. You have a crush on him, don't you? Did you think I didn't notice anything? Advice and love. I did it all for you. And you." The guests dispersed. Very different people entered the hall. Miranda was sitting on the steps of the registry office, holding her little son in her arms and crying bitterly. Everything seemed to be right. The truth had been revealed. Alex the deceiver had been exposed, and now she wouldn't have to marry someone she didn't love. But for some reason it was so hard on her soul. Everything wasn't like normal people. Everything was going wrong. And then William in an expensive suit sat down next to her on the steps and quietly said, "I love you, Miranda. But I only realized it when I was released from prison. I walked around the empty house and couldn't find a place to be. I miss your slightly sad but beautiful eyes, your laugh, your smile. I'm sitting in the nursery like crazy, staring at Justin's empty cot. I hold his bunny in my arms and realize how much I want to hug you both. I know Alex is your first love, and you probably still have feelings for him." Miranda couldn't believe her ears. She threw herself into William's arms and rambled on. No, you've got it all wrong. Alex was blackmailing me. He said if I didn't agree to marry him, he wouldn't tell the truth to the police, and you wouldn't get out of jail. How could I ruin your life? So I did. But every day with Alex was torture. I walked to that wedding like it was an execution. I couldn't walk. I love you too, honestly. I only realized that when I started living with Alex. I kept comparing him to you, you know. I'd hug him, and I'd think about you. And I was dying to know that you and I were never going to be together. Why would you want a messed up, troubled wife like me? I, in my opinion, like a magnet to myself, misfortune and misfortune attracts. Then the wrong guy met. Then the house suddenly burned to the ground. Then you suffered because of me. With my fiancé broke up. I am already afraid of myself." William hugged her and Justin too and replied, "My silly girl, you're not the problem at all. It was Brooke who set the house on fire. She confessed in court. It had nothing to do with you at all. That poor woman is possessed and needs to be treated. Alex was just a cleverly manipulative manipulator. That's all. Your whole problem is that you had the wrong man around. The wrong man, you know. I'm going to make sure you never cry again. Justin's like family to me now. I'm going to give him my last name, and you're going to be my wife. We're going to be fine, you hear me? I believe it." Those were the most eagerly awaited words. Miranda was perfectly happy at that moment. The three of them sat hugging each other like that. Even Justin was quiet, as if he realized the importance of the moment. The newlyweds coming out of the registry office, seeing this strange couple, suddenly jokingly shouted, "Bitter." And all the guests immediately picked up and clapped. And Miranda and William kissed passionately. It was so touching and so exciting. Alex was back in jail. He was angry with Miranda and the world. He felt betrayed by everyone, unappreciative of his efforts. He deliberately got into fights and confrontations in his cell, as if he were playing with death. And finally one day he was fatally stabbed with a shiv. That's how Alex's life ended, so stupidly and so ridiculously. It was as if his whole life was a struggle between good and evil, and he didn't know whether to choose the light or the dark side. Her father had helped Brooke get out of prison and had taken her away from the city to a foreign country. Now the woman was undergoing a long course of psychological rehabilitation and treatment. The specialist explained to her little by little that you can't force a person to fall in love or fall out of love. In time she came to her senses and stopped dwelling on her worries and delusions of revenge. And then she met a good man and learned to build honest relationships without lies and blackmail. Miranda and William married, raised a son, and dreamed of a daughter. They lived in perfect harmony, and that ultrasound result was carefully kept in their safe as a memory of how they met. There are many other things in life. For as long as she could remember, Megan had always dreamed of warmth, care, and attention. All this she lacked from early childhood. Megan's mom died of a heart attack when she was about 5 years old. Operation of the ward was forbidden to give birth at all due to health conditions. Doctors warned of the risks, but the woman still decided. The first years of her life, Megan was the most beloved child in the world. She vaguely remembered those times of warm hugs, mom's tender words, and kind smile. But of course, no matter how hard Megan tried, she couldn't remember the details. Mom's face was lost in a blur. And then Megan was left alone with her father, a somber and uncommunicative man. He faithfully fulfilled his parental duties. Fed his daughter, bought her clothes, even checked her homework, but any heart-to-heart talk was out of the question. Her father asked only specific questions about her grades at school, her health, her plans for vacations. Sometimes he wondered if anyone was hurting his daughter. Megan couldn't remember if Dad had always been so uncommunicative or if he had been so changed by the death of the woman he loved. Megan had heard from neighbors that her father loved her mother very much. He had long sought the favor of the modest beauty, and then, when Elena married him, fulfilled every wish of his wife. It was hard for Megan to imagine her perpetually dissatisfied father as romantic, loving, attentive. As she grew older, the girl understood. The father blames his daughter for the death of his spouse, accidentally overhearing his conversation with a neighbor. The men were standing in the stairwell, and Megan was just returning from school. The anniversary of her mother's passing was approaching. I guess that's why the neighbors, longtime friends, were having this conversation. I told her to get an abortion, Dad said quietly. But she wouldn't have it. Let it be, she said. She had a premonition that everything would end well. Megan, hearing these words, froze under the stairs. She just couldn't get up right now, thus giving away her presence. Well, it's all good in the end, and it was good at first. Uncle Peter, the neighbor, pointed out. Megan knew her mom was friends with his wife and Aunt Gray. Megan was born. Adeline still had a whole 5 years to live afterward. That's so sad, Dad agreed, but her health was failing, and I could see she was getting worse. And those sleepless nights, I myself tried to get up to my daughter to adult her to sleep, but I could not be there all the time. And those assholes, they finished her after 5 years. That's for sure. Even the doctor confirmed it. Megan was having a hard time processing what she had heard. She hadn't discussed it with anyone. And who would she tell? Her father, as it turned out, considered her the culprit of all his misfortunes, so he probably didn't talk to his daughter much. Megan didn't have any grandmothers, or rather she had one, her dad's mom, but she lived far away in the country. They saw each other very rarely, and of course, warm, trusting relations between them did not arise. And girlfriends. What about girlfriends? You can't talk to them about such topics. They won't understand. They're just fine. Each of them has a mom, a dad. Not all of them do, but mom is the main mom. For so many tears, her childhood teenage years were spilled into a pillow. Longing for a mother the girl hardly knew or remembered. Sadness over the cool and strained relationship with her father. Megan dreamed of growing up sooner, having a family of her own, having children. She had no doubt that sooner or later a man would appear in her life who would love and protect her. And Megan would be happiness for him, a source of energy and inspiration. The father probably still loved his daughter in his own way. He rooted, loved, cared for his daughter as best he could, worried about her future. It was her father who arranged for the girl to go to the University of Economics and Law, and even to the prestigious Faculty of Finance and Economics, connected some connections, and now his daughter, who would hardly have been admitted on general grounds, is a student of the best university in the city. No, Megan was not stupid or lazy. She had always done well in school, and she had always done her homework diligently. But it was just that to enter this faculty required a very outstanding ability. The girl didn't have them, so her father helped her. True, among the girl's classmates, as it soon turned out, outstanding abilities possessed few. So many then got into the university this way either for money or by blat. Megan liked studying, and somehow warm, friendly relations with her classmates were formed at once. A wonderful student time began. Life had changed a lot. Megan felt that very soon she would become an adult and independent, which means that her dream of a loving family is very close. In the 4th year, fate dealt the girl another crushing blow. She was left all alone. Her father is frowning and not talking, but so reliable. In the shop where he worked, a milling machine operator, a gas cylinder failed, and a fire broke out. There were few casualties, but Megan's father was among them. Then left alone in the whole world, Megan realized that all this time felt the support and love of a loved one. Yes, her father had been that kind of man, unable to express his feelings, not saying much. But now Megan realized it, how much he did for her. About a year, the girl came to herself, got used to the new world without her father, and then John appeared in her life. John was a student at their school, but he was in a different department, law school. He, like Megan, was graduating that year. They met at a lecture in the auditorium, which was common for soon-to-be graduates. Young people were told about the very procedure of graduation, state exams and diploma, introduced young people to possible employers, presented companies that offered jobs to the best and most diligent students. It was interesting. Megan happened to be among strangers. Her friends were sitting at the other end of the hall, but Megan was a little late, and there was no seat next to them. So she had to sit where there were still empty chairs. At first, all the girl's attention was focused on the stage. She caught every word of the speakers, even wrote something down. "Why, Bert?" An unexpected question took the girl by surprise. She turned around and looked at the speaker. A handsome guy was looking at her with a smile. A wide smile, white teeth, correct facial features, and bright blue eyes. They immediately charmed Megan. There was so much interest in them. The girl suddenly felt that she cared about this man. "It's so depressing," he repeated, "and the weather outside is so beautiful. Spring is in full swing. There's a spring flower festival in the park. Why don't we run away?" It was the first time Megan had ever seen this guy. Besides, the lecture was very important and interesting, and after it, Megan and her friends agreed to go to the library to prepare together for the credit on economic theory. But all this somehow suddenly lost importance, and the girl nodded her head in agreement. The boy glowed, as if her answer made him the happiest man in the world. He confidently took Megan's hand and led her away from the classroom. Some people looked at the couple, but Megan didn't care at all. The weather did turn out to be wonderful. The sun was shining brightly from the clear sky, which was softly blue, and the freshness and purity of the greenery had just blossomed. The air was filled with the aromas of plants beginning to bloom. On the way, the young people got acquainted. It turned out that the guy's name was John. He admitted that as soon as he saw Megan, he couldn't take his eyes off her. "You're just incredibly beautiful," he said, looking at the girl. And she, strangely enough, did not feel a shadow of doubt, although always distinguished by modesty, and even stiff. I looked at you for a long time. I dared to talk to you because I was afraid you'd send me away. And when you agreed to go away with me, it was a weight off my shoulders." Megan was pleased to hear those words. She liked John more and more. What if a girl forbade herself to even dream of such a thing, so as not to be disappointed? What if he was the man she would later start a family with? Yes, these thoughts visited Megan at the first acquaintance. They started dating. John turned out to be a reliable, loving, sensitive man. Having learned the girl's story, it was as if he took her under his wing. He tried to help Megan with everything. The guy even helped her renovate her house. And more precisely, he did it himself, almost alone because the girl did not understand anything about it at all. A little more time passed. The young people graduated from university and both got a job. Megan became an accountant in a small firm for the installation of intercoms. John went as an assistant judge at the local courthouse. Megan knew by then that John was growing up without a father. His mother had given birth to him at a rather late age. As they say, for herself. She was a powerful woman who had spent her entire life in a senior position at the airport. Even now, at her advanced age, she didn't want to leave her position. John kept trying to introduce Megan to her, but for some reason, the girl was afraid of what if John's mother didn't like her. What then if this woman will be against the relationship of the only son with a girl of the lower strata of society? John laughed at these fears. Mom wasn't like that. Yes, she is used to command, but in everything that concerns me, she gives me freedom and autonomy. I've been on my own for 6 years. She's always worked hard, and I've been at home looking after the household. So don't worry, I'm not a mama's boy, and she's not a monster. Still, Megan persisted in making up excuses not to go visit John's mother. Worried, anxious, dreading the meeting. And then John proposed to Megan. It cannot be said that it was quite unexpected. Relationships of young people have long been strong. Both of them could not imagine life without each other. The girl had no doubt that John was the man she had dreamed of since childhood. He gave her everything that Megan lacked: love, attention, care, tenderness, or she could talk to him about anything. A soulmate. Sometimes Megan couldn't believe her luck. It might not have happened if she hadn't been in the chair next to John at the lecture that day. It was just such an accident of fate. John did everything beautifully, just like in the movies. He invited Megan to a restaurant to celebrate his small promotion. The girl had no idea of the true motives behind the date. Then suddenly musicians came up to them and played a beautiful melody. Megan, flapping her eyes in surprise, looked at the men in white tails. Then a waiter appeared with a gorgeous bouquet of roses. John took it from the hands of the young man and with a smile presented it to Megan, then deftly pulled out of his pocket a velvet box. "Be my wife." John smiled, looking into Megan's eyes. "You are the most beautiful girl in the world. I love you and I want to be with you always." The girl then even had tears flowing from her eyes, so much she was touched. This proposal, it was made so beautifully. John had carefully prepared for the meeting, so much thought. What was happening resembled a scene from a good, though not too original melodrama. The young people began to prepare for the wedding. Both decided that they did not need a lavish celebration, just a party with friends from the university and a restaurant. And yet it was necessary to solve a lot of issues, to book a place in the registry office, to find a restaurant, to think over the menu. And, of course, now Megan had to meet John's mom. There was no point in delaying the meeting any longer. Megan remembered the day she'd first seen Martha. She'd been terribly nervous, but the woman who'd opened the door had seemed to be smiling at her genuinely. Tall, slender Martha looked very stylish in her elegant dress, with her hair slicked back smoothly. A real lady, and she behaved in a very friendly and polite manner. Megan realized at once that John's mother belonged to the so-called cold type of women. Careerist, used to work hard, compete, and achieve their goals. John is the same. He does not wait for heart-to-heart talks, warm embraces. No worldly advice. Martha's not going to be a second mom. And in the role of caring grandmother who spoils grandchildren with pies, it is also difficult to imagine her, but it's all nonsense. Martha caused Megan respect and even admiration. You bet, because she has achieved so much on her own and became a boss and a wonderful son raised. All this alone, without the help of her husband or relatives. After the wedding, began to live in Megan's apartment. Both worked. John received a good salary. Enough even for some excesses, cafes and restaurants, beautiful clothes, concerts, and most importantly, to travel. For 2 years of marriage, Young managed to go to the sea 5 times. Not to luxury resorts with 5-star hotels, but still it was a wonderful vacation. Cheerful, carefree, full of sunshine and warmth, Megan and John together learned to lead a household. In principle, the young wife knew how to do everything. She had been living alone for a long time, but the head of the family had to learn new skills. Although John coped with it quickly and even as if playfully, Megan felt happier than ever. Next to her was a man who understood her half a word. John listened with interest to Megan's news, accumulated during the day, in all situations took her side, and he often hugged his young wife on and off. Megan realized that she had finally met the man she had long dreamed of and mentally thanked fate for this chance encounter. "I wish our Stephen would turn out to be so smart and responsible," what the young father dreamed, rocking his tiny son in his arms. Megan nodded her head. She had slightly different plans for this child. The young mother wanted Stephen to be happy and healthy, and the rest was not so important. You didn't have to be a factory manager at all to feel joyful and peaceful. Stephen did turn out to be an incredibly curious little boy. He was ahead of his peers in many ways. Early began to walk, early spoke. The baby constantly asked his parents questions, was interested in the world around him, trying to understand literally everything. The newly baptized parents did not want the soul in the firstborn. And when he was about 4 years old, John and Megan decided that it was time to give birth to Stephen's little sister. Megan hoped that she and John would have a daughter. She wanted to give this little girl everything she didn't have herself. Pretty dresses, smart hairstyles at the matinee, talking about girly topics, doing things together in the kitchen and all that. But Richard was born, a wonderful blue-eyed baby boy, charming, charismatic, attracting the attention of others. So what's for the daughter next time? John smiled, rocking the stroller. It was their first family outing of the city. Stephen was holding on to the handle of the stroller too. He was so looking forward to his brother, so excited to see him. True, when Richard was brought home from the hospital, he was a little disappointed. It turned out that Stephen had hoped that his brother would be older right away. He imagined a boy with whom he could play catch-up or hide and seek. Time flew by at breakneck speed. It turned out that coping with a couple of little boys at once is not so easy. And then, unexpectedly, Martha came to Megan's rescue. Every day after work, her mother-in-law would rush home, quickly change her clothes, have dinner, and then go straight to her daughter-in-law's house. John was often late in court, sometimes coming in late at night. Megan was exhausted by evening, and it was during this difficult period that Martha appeared. To take care of the grandchildren, she would go out with the little ones to walk in the yard. Sometimes they went further into the park. It was only 2, well, at most 3 hours a day. But how Megan looked forward to them each time. While the kids were away, she had time to clean up, cook something, go to the bathroom, and all in peace and quiet. It seemed like a small thing, but for a young, tired mother, it was a real salvation. How grateful Megan was to Martha. She repeatedly told her mother-in-law about it, and the latter smiled and replied that she herself was happy to communicate with her grandchildren. No, a warm and close relationship between daughter-in-law and mother-in-law had not developed, although Megan wanted it very much. She invited her mother-in-law to tea, tried to start frank conversations, but this woman, she was some too aloof, cold and inaccessible like the Snow Queen. It was either her personality or she didn't like Megan very much. Eventually, Megan stopped worrying about it and accepted the situation as it was. Martha stayed away from her daughter-in-law with advice, reproaches, and moralizing. She showed up when Megan needed her and helped the young mother a lot. Perhaps the woman herself did not even realize how she supported Megan in a difficult period. A little more time passed, the boys grew up. Now both went to the garden, and Megan was finally able to go to work. There was more money in the family. The couple began planning a summer trip to the sea. It was to be their children's first. And then life in the country began to change. Enterprises were closing one after another. That fate befell the firm where Megan worked. The woman was out of work. John's salary began to be delayed steadily, which, by the way, at the new price level was not enough even for the most basic necessities. John was now practically never home at all. After a working day in court, he ran around the city looking for a part-time job. Somewhere to guard a warehouse, somewhere to help unload a truck. The man grabbed every opportunity to bring home an extra. Megan was a housewife now. She was looking for a job in her specialty. She ran to interviews, advertised in newspapers, but there was no result. In the end, the woman couldn't even get a job as a salesman. There was no demand for jobs in their town at that time. Megan was glad that she was able to at least find a job as a cleaner. Now she scrubbed the floors in the entryways of a neighboring house in the early morning while everyone was still asleep. It didn't pay much, but there was a plus side to the job. It ended late in the morning. The whole day was free. Money was scarce. The children were growing at a dizzying rate, and clothes were quickly becoming too small for them. They also needed nutritious meals. This John and Megan could sit on buckwheat or pasta, and the boys need vitamins, meat, fruit, milk. Young spouses were often close to despair. It was Martha who kept them from being completely lost. She was cut down long ago, as she should have been on a well-deserved vacation by age. And just someone needed a warm place, which for a long time was occupied by a firm and principled boss. But Martha managed to save a certain amount of money during the years of work at a fairly high post. She dreamed of buying a small house by the sea where she expected to meet her old age. But circumstances have changed and prices have risen. Now the woman's savings would not be enough for a decent home, and she was not going to buy anything. So Martha used her savings to sponsor the young family every month. Both John and Megan knew if anything happened, they wouldn't be lost. Martha wouldn't let them go under, but at the same time, they both didn't want to abuse the woman's help, so they did their best. It was hard, and yet the feeling of a strong rear end kept them from being discouraged. In spite of everything that was happening, Martha was still unknown to Megan. Her mother-in-law kept her distance from her daughter-in-law, and she didn't hug her son either. But grandchildren are a different matter. Pulling next to them, the woman blossomed. She embraced them without shyness, kissed them, called them affectionate nicknames, and the boys reciprocated. Megan sometimes tried to talk to her husband about it. "Don't worry about it. Mom was always like that." He smiled. "Just a person like that, kind, good, loving. But she does not know how to show her feelings. Maybe it's because Mom grew up in an orphanage. She didn't get love when she was a kid. So she doesn't know how to express her feelings. But she's reliable, and she doesn't abandon her own." When John and Megan's sons went to school, Martha took over the lessons. It turned out that she once, many years ago, wanted to become an elementary school teacher. Then the woman's career took a different path. But now the long-time dream was realized in her grandchildren. Grandmother was inspired by the boys. She knew how to be strict and demanding, but at the same time she emphasized to interest Stephen and Richard, to instill in them a thirst for knowledge, to develop the innate abilities of her grandchildren. While parents tried to get an extra penny and disappeared on earnings, their children did not run homeless in the yard. They were under the reliable supervision of their grandmother, who invested a lot in their development. Stephen and Richard were the best students in their classes. They were also good at sports, because Martha had time to take them to the volleyball section located on the other side of the city. In this sports center, the best coach worked, and Martha did not agree to anything less for her grandchildren. And so they lived, stretched, supported each other, raised their children. And then one day John got tired of working, as the man himself put it, miserable existence. He decided to risk opening his own business. It is clear that the man took the money for the promotion of the business from his mother. And where else? Not by taking out loans from the bank at crazy interest rates. Then the newlyweds had their first son, Stephen. The name was chosen by John, the name of his neighbor, who paid a lot of attention to the boy and became for him a kind of a substitute for his grandfather. He was a respected man, serious, intelligent. He headed a whole local factory for a long time. John bought some technical stuff from a warehouse in a neighboring town, sold it on the market at a higher price, and immediately made a profit, albeit a small one. The success inspired John, so he decided to work in this direction and registered as a sole proprietorship. Megan helped him with the documents. She was an economist, worked as an accountant for a long time, so reporting and primary documentation were completely on her. The couple rented a place in the market and began work. At first, the business was slow. The client base had not yet been built up. Links with suppliers had not been established. Profits in the first few months were either minimal or non-existent. I had to solve many different problems. Sometimes I even wanted to give up, but in the end, the business went on, and the small store earned money. Finally, the family had money, albeit small, but their own. They didn't have to ask Martha for help anymore. John even managed to pay her back the money he had borrowed for the business. Megan knew that her mother-in-law tried to refuse to give this help as a gift to the young family. But John insisted they flew to the sea after all. The boys were already old enough. Megan watched with what joy they were running along the beach, and her heart sank with delight. What happiness this was. More on that next. John's business grew. Soon the man opened an entire store, then another. Now he had a whole staff working for him, accountants, managers, salespeople. But Megan was given the opportunity not to work and to deal with the house and children. True, the boys had already become teenagers and no longer needed a nanny. But the family moved to a private house, and Megan had a whole garden at her disposal. For its improvement, the woman took up with energy and inspiration. And again, she thanked fate for what is happening in her life. The house is a full cup, a loving husband, wonderful, talented children. Every day a reason for joy and pride, and a garden in which Megan felt like a full mistress. Here she felt calm, relaxed, peaceful. The woman believed that her present life was a reward for what she had experienced as a child. She also often regretted that her father did not see how wonderful life was for his daughter. He probably would have been happy for Megan, and he certainly would have cherished his grandchildren. And yet, as time went on, Megan began to realize that something was missing. John had grown distant. No, they still had a wonderful relationship. Her husband was never rude to her, always remembered holidays and their personal dates. Only he was too busy working. He came home late at night, often flew on business trips, literally lived his life. Stephen and Richard are almost adults now. They have their own lives, their own friends, their own interests, and that's fine. It was just a little sad that their sons had grown up so quickly and Megan hadn't had time to fully enjoy their childhood years, too busy trying to survive. Martha remained alien and cold. Such a temperament. Megan probably didn't even know until now how or what to talk to her about. Their only topic of conversation was probably Richard and Stephen. Her mother-in-law had grown old, but she still looked like an iron lady. She lived separately, and she refused to move out of her own apartment, where she was the full mistress, into her son's house. And Megan understood and supported her in this. And in this difficult period in Megan's life, again not happiness. She didn't even believe her feelings at first. She thought she just didn't even seem to allow the thought to be true. But then it became all too obvious. Megan realized she was expecting a baby again after all these years. John seemed overjoyed, but still took the news a little too reservedly. There wasn't the excitement in his eyes that there had been years ago when he had learned of his wife's first and second pregnancies. Wow, so unexpected. He smiled, then pulled Megan close and kissed her. We need to find you the best doctors. We're getting older, you know. Megan understood and was worried too, of course. Being pregnant in your early 20s was very different from being pregnant with a woman in her 40s. There are definitely more risks. The sons took the news of the imminent arrival of a brother or sister positively. Wow, we're going to have a little one. Stephen smiled. It's so weird, but I like the news. It's fun, Richard shook his head. Martha, hearing the news, only shrugged her shoulders. Well, it's unexpected, of course, but it's nothing special. I had John when I was a little younger than you. Everything's going to be all right now. The pregnancy, despite Megan's misgivings, went easily, but as an older woman, she had to undergo more frequent checkups. At the next ultrasound, Megan lay on the cold couch and prayed to herself that the baby would be okay. She, of course, dreamed of a daughter and a long time ago, since childhood. After the birth of her two sons, the wish had been forgotten. And now, when she found out that she was pregnant again, Megan began to hope again, how she wanted to become a mom of a charming girl. The woman chased these thoughts away from herself, convinced that one should be happy with any child. And it was unlikely that after two boys, suddenly such a miracle would happen. Why would it be a girl? Now, lying on the couch, Megan wanted only one thing, that with this child that lives under her heart, everything turned out to be all right. Whether it's a boy or a girl is a matter of 10. Being pregnant with her first sons, Megan didn't know much. Now she had a wealth of information that made her heart clench anxiously, and her eyes gaze into the face of the doctor, inserting a sensor across her abdomen to read her emotions. Storina kept thinking the doctor was frowning. How scared she was. Was it really that bad in there? Do you have a girl? Suddenly the man in the white coat said in a calm, mundane tone. A hot wave of joy flooded Megan's heart. She even felt a little dizzy. She hadn't expected to be told the gender so early. And then there was a girl. Was this really happening to her? Had her dream come true after all these years? Is she all right? Megan asked Megan the question she wanted to know. She's fine. No abnormalities. Vivian was born on her due date. Megan had thought of a name for her daughter a long time ago. Back in college, I think. The girl was born a healthy baby and soon became the family's favorite. Martha now came to Megan's house every day to babysit her granddaughter. Once again, her help came in handy. Megan adored her daughter because she had waited so long for her. She had stopped dreaming of such a gift, but sometimes she needed time to take a bath or go shopping alone. And then Martha came to the rescue again. Her time flew by at breakneck speed. Megan knew it was always like that when you have a small child. He's just a helpless little baby. Before you know it, it's already a person with its own personality and hobbies. Vivian turned out to be a pretty little girl. She took after Megan, was the same swarthy, slender, and graceful, but her eyes were her father's, huge, bright blue. They shone on her swarthy, beautiful face. The boys had all grown up. Stephen graduated first. He easily got into the Boston Medical Academy. Stephen must have decided in the 5th grade that he was going to be a doctor. At first, his parents thought it was a frivolous hobby. But as time went on, the eldest son stayed true to his dream. In the end, he entered the medical school, and on the budget. Megan at first was afraid to let the young guy alone in the big city. But Stephen, he was serious enough and independent for such a university. So in the end, his mother had to respectfully accept his decision. A few years later, Richard followed his brother. He, too, entered Boston University, only he chose a different specialty. From childhood, he was attracted to computers, programs, technical puzzles. The sons flew out of the nest. The husband lived a life of work. During this period, Megan realized what a happiness it is that she has a daughter small, beautiful, loved, and loving. She filled women's lives with joy and happiness, made it bright and meaningful. If it weren't for Vivian, Megan would feel all alone and unneeded now. Vivian practiced ballet and the girl was doing great. The choreographers were all saying she had real talent. Megan knew that her daughter went in her. Except that in childhood, Megan did not have such an opportunity to show her gift. Her father, of course, did not take her daughter to a club, but Vivian had succeeded. The girl even traveled with performances in different cities. A real tour, loving, caring mother everywhere accompanied her. It was a bright and saturated life, which gave Megan a daughter. Everything was good, just wonderful. The boys studied and worked in Boston. Megan visited them occasionally. The sons were happy, and that made them happy. John was developing a business that was bringing in more and more profit. Now Karina had a daughter, whose long-standing dream was finally realized. It would seem, live and rejoice. But the woman's heart was increasingly clenched from some vague premonitions. Something was wrong. Megan chased away bad thoughts. She was even going to see a psychologist, but one day, the cause of the vague anxiety revealed itself. Megan had gone to the mall to find a dress for her daughter's next performance. Vivian had caught a cold somewhere in the garden, so Martha stayed with her. Megan went to the mall. The woman was in high spirits. She had managed to find a wonderful outfit for her daughter, and it was just the right size. She imagined how excited her little girl's eyes would be when she saw the outfit. That's when the woman noticed John. She just happened to glance down, going up the escalator, and saw her husband on the first floor in a bright orange shirt, which she herself had given him. It was a stylish shirt with short sleeves, summer, dressy, and elegant at the same time. John liked it immediately, and now he often wore it to work. John wasn't walking alone, but with a young girl in his arms. From afar, Megan couldn't see all the details, couldn't see the stranger's face, didn't have time to estimate her age. But she noticed the main thing. John's hand was resting on the thin waist of the young woman. She, in turn, had her palm in the back pocket of John's pants. John was smiling happily. The world turned upside down in just a few moments. Megan stood on the escalator steps. She considered herself a happy, accomplished woman who had managed to build a strong family. And on the next floor, she arrived already a cheated and betrayed spouse. To gather her thoughts, Megan went up to the food court, settled down at a small table in the far corner of the hall, and ordered herself a coffee. What she had just witnessed, how to explain it? Megan really wanted to find some excuse for what she had seen, but it wasn't working. If she wanted to, she could still convince herself that John was just walking through the mall with a female employee. Maybe they wanted to look at the assortment of competitors or something else. John had his arm around the stranger's waist. Both of them were not embarrassed by the people, who at this time in the mall were plenty. They walked with their arms around each other and smiled as if they were well-off free students. And between them there was clearly a special relationship. It was immediately apparent. Is John cheating on her? It's hard to believe. Almost impossible. But why impossible? Megan began to reflect on her life and realized that she and John had long lived as close relatives, but not as loving spouses. All their conversations revolved around their children and their future. When was the last time they had gone out together? Besides, John was away at work too often, flying on business trips. Maybe it wasn't business trips at all, but traveling with young mistresses. Megan found it hard to breathe, as if she'd been hit in the solar plexus. She couldn't get enough air. Everything was spinning in front of her eyes. Was her happy married life just an illusion? How stupid did she have to be not to see it? Megan decided not to get too excited. She pulled herself together and got up from the table. She'd have to go home and act like nothing had happened. When John returned, she would discreetly take his cell phone and look into his correspondence. Then everything will be clear, and we can do something about it. You need proof. Otherwise, you can fantasize a lot of things. Maybe it's not so bad after all. That night, Megan put her plan into action. She'd always trusted her husband. It had never occurred to her to go through his phone before, and John knew it because his cell phone didn't even have a password. The man had left the phone on the coffee table when he went to the bathroom. He generally assumed that his spouse was already asleep. Megan was awake. As soon as the sound of water came from the bathroom, she slipped out of bed and went downstairs. She grabbed her husband's cell phone, entered his messages, and there was a lot of interesting things. Megan learned that her husband's lover's name was Catherine. She was only 25 years old, not much older than Stephen. Deceived spouse, leafed through numerous photos of a young girl. On them, she showed the advantages of her luxurious figure. Incredibly beautiful, daring Catherine was not shy and wrote such things, which rather even think was embarrassing, but John clearly liked it. Apparently, the couple had already had quite a long affair. John was firmly on the hook for the young beauty. They called each other cute nicknames, made plans for a summer vacation. Apparently, the lovers had not the first time traveled together to the sea. It hurt to read this correspondence, but she needed to know what was going on. What she saw shocked her. She did not want to believe that all this was true. The correspondence was also about Megan. Catherine called her lover's wife an old lady. John did not even try to defend his wife. On the contrary, sent in response smiling smiley faces saying it's funny to him. How could this happen to them? They were once the closest and dearest people to each other, two halves of one whole. They had overcome so much together, and suddenly this happened. The sound of the water in the bathroom faded, and Megan hurriedly returned the phone to its place and rushed into the kitchen. Let John think she'd gotten a drink of water. For now, she didn't want to show her husband that she was aware of this ugly affair on the side. She didn't want to, or she just couldn't. She needed to digest the news, figure out how to proceed, realize after all what she really wants, and get used to the idea that John is not a reliable wall, behind which so cozy to hide from the hardships of life and the usual traitor. Outwardly, nothing has changed in the life of the family, but now Megan became more attentive. John's delays at work and his constant business trips were perceived quite differently from time to time. While John was in the bathroom or out without his phone at the neighbor's, Megan would look at his phone. Catherine texted John often. Some of the messages were quite explicit. They were usually accompanied by pictures of the girl. To give Catherine credit, she looked great. Judging by the state of her body, the girl spent long hours in the gym. From the correspondence, Megan realized that Catherine does not work and does not study. A typical kept woman. John was apparently willing to pay for it all. No, Megan knew that men just over 40 often pay attention to young nymphs. They probably feel younger, more energetic, stronger than their peers. And what is there to hide? 25-year-old friends are generally much more attractive than 40-year-olds, but the woman thought that her family would not be affected by this. She remembered the way John had looked at her, what he had said to her. He had genuinely loved Megan. Once upon a time, she had never doubted that. Could such feelings also grow cold with time? Catherine was no longer just a lover or a girl for occasional entertainment, who could be dumped at any time, swapped for another. John and his young lady's relationship was about 5 years old. Sometimes historical dates were glimpsed in their correspondence, and the oldest ones were around the time Vivian was born. Apparently, that was when they had met. Megan remembered that period of time after giving birth and with a newborn baby in her arms. She didn't feel very well. She probably looked even worse. Megan was completely focused on her health. She didn't even have the energy for her sons at the time. Thankfully, by the time they were born, her sisters had long since managed to become fully independent young men. Of course, Megan paid almost no attention to her husband because, as it seemed to her, there was no need. A grown man passionate about his work. But maybe that was where the mistake lay. Maybe she herself was to blame for what was happening to their family now. Megan shook her head and chased away the wrong thoughts. What was her fault? It was John, after all, who had decided to look for fun aside. No would have supported his wife in her time of need, to take on some of the responsibilities, to take care of his spouse and newly born daughter. No, John chose another option. Catherine may not be his first mistress. John had been estranged for a long time, after all. Megan realized that clearly now. It's just that the woman preferred not to notice such trifles as distant alarm bells. He earns money, does everything for the family, does not drink, does not beat, does not humiliate. In money does not limit. Well and wonderful. What else is there to complain about? Megan wasn't complaining. She lived and enjoyed a happy, as it seemed to her, family life. And then suddenly it hit her. Maybe Catherine was not John's first mistress, but that it was with her he had a serious enough relationship, Megan did not doubt. John was truly in love with the girl. It could be felt in the tone of his messages. What only affectionate words he did not call his mistress. The man protected his lady from domestic, financial, and any other problems, gave her gifts, was constantly interested in her desire. It pained Megan to read this. Perhaps he had never behaved like that with her, even in the golden years of their marriage. It was understandable then. They were spinning, surviving, pulling children not to sentimentality. Megan realized that Catherine was getting on John's nerves about the divorce. Well, and when you already divorced your old lady, wrote the girl, supplying the message with red from anger emoticons. All in due time, baby. Answered John. I'd like more details. I'm in the process. A lot of things need to be prepared so that we can live not only happily but also richly. My princess loves a beautiful life. John's usually reserved and serious demeanor made Megan almost nauseous, but she continued to read the messages, looking for information about the upcoming divorce. She was more interested in this issue than any other, because it directly affected her and the children. Megan wasn't particularly worried about how her sons would take the divorce. They were adults and both of them had been living on their own for a long time. For them, most likely little will change. But the daughter, she is accustomed to this house and adores her father. Despite his indifference, the little girl would be very worried. Megan had no doubt about that, and something would have to be done about it. John's messages sometimes slipped in that he was taking his time with the divorce to properly prepare for leaving. What would that mean? The spouse was clearly up to something, and Megan wanted to find out what it was about. As far as her relationship with her spouse was concerned, nothing much had changed since Megan had found out about Catherine. Faking ignorance was easy. Megan and John hadn't spoken in a long time. Hey, how are you? How are the kids? That's all they talked about. And that's the life they've had for a long time. How come Megan didn't realize this before? I guess she was too busy with her daughter and her own worries and plans. She didn't tell Martha the details of her son's life, of course. She still came over sometimes to play with her granddaughter. There were times that Megan took Vivian to her grandmother to go on business. But the relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law never became warm and frank. Over the years, Megan had trusted Martha completely in everything about the baby. Perhaps it was the only person with whom the woman could leave her daughter with a light heart. But otherwise, over the years, Martha and Megan had remained largely strangers to each other. No, of course, Megan couldn't tell Martha about John, though she wanted to share it with someone. Why worry the older woman? Of course, she'd be upset to hear about her son's behavior. Will be worried it will negatively affect her health. Of course, the mother-in-law will still find out about the divorce, which of course she will. Even if John did not plan this procedure, Megan herself would have organized it, because cannot live with a traitor. That's how she perceived her husband now. If you're in love with someone else, say so. Why lie, why hide, why scheme? John never once scolded Catherine when she insulted Megan in her messages. And the old woman had called her both fat and stupid. John had at best ignored those unflattering remarks, at worst responded with laughing emoticons. It was hurtful. But Megan was much more interested in her husband's vague promises to divorce her as soon as everything was financially settled. The spouse was preparing something, some kind of scam. the results of which Megan was to be left with nothing. The man didn't write about it directly. His understandable correspondence with his mistress had a completely different character, was light, humorous, in some places hot. But from some of the words and hints, Megan knew John was up to something. But how would she know what surprise to expect? Surely John and his mistress would discuss the details of the plan when they met. Megan, understandably, felt the whole situation hard. The pain of betrayal of a loved one, a vague future suspended state, all this frightened her, and there was no one to share it with. Had her mother been alive, how much easier would this trouble have been to bear? Megan slept badly, became nervous, pale and thin, irritable and withdrawn. Her physical condition even worsened, with headaches. One morning, as Megan was feeding her daughter breakfast, her mother-in-law called. "Are you home now?" Martha asked. "Yes," Megan answered. "John's at work, but my daughter and I are home." "Great, I'll be right there." Megan was overjoyed. "That's great. That means the mother-in-law can take care of her granddaughter. Meanwhile, she's going to go to the doctor. She's been having a lot of headaches. Have them prescribe some pills. I can't stand it anymore." Martha showed up as usual with a present for her granddaughter. A beautiful doll in a big pink box. The girl threw herself on her grandmother's neck. No, not because of the toy, of course, but there was just a special bond between Martha and Vivian. The grandmother and granddaughter seemed to understand each other without words. Megan had seen something like that before with her sons. Martha was a wonderful grandmother to all her children, sensitive, caring, attentive. It was surprising, considering her bossy, somewhat cold nature. Surprising, but wonderful. It's so nice to know that your children are so loved by someone other than you. "Good morning." Megan smiled at her mother-in-law. "It's so good to have you here. Vivian missed you." "I actually came to see you today." The smile that had been directed at her granddaughter slid off the older woman's face. She stared at her daughter-in-law. Megan immediately tensed, sensing that this was going to be a serious matter. "Go in the living room and watch cartoons." "Okay?" Megan turned to her daughter. She nodded her head and obediently slipped out of the room. She promised her mother and grandmother that they would join her soon to play with the new dolls. Martha and Megan were left alone in the kitchen. "What was that about? What did you want to talk to me about?" Megan asked. Martha didn't answer right away. It was obvious that she was having a hard time starting a conversation. Her mother-in-law sat down on a chair behind the counter that divides the kitchen into two parts. Megan sat across from her. "Do you know that John has been the only person near and dear to me for a long time?" Martha said at last. "Until the grandchildren came along and you." Megan nodded. Of course she knew that. Martha had been pulling her son along on her own, working all her life, making sure the child had everything she needed, and yet not basking in gold, but really raising John, always making time for him. When her husband talked about his childhood, Megan sometimes wondered where Martha, working at such a responsible high position, took the strength to do so much with the child. She went hiking with him, and took him to museums, circuses, theaters, and every evening read books to him, and checked his lessons, and taught him everything around the house from cleaning and cooking to fixing the faucet. It's a tremendous amount of work. Megan realized this fully when she became a mother herself. "I tried to raise John to be a good person. Not only smart and successful, but also reliable and decent, not like his father. For a long time I thought I had succeeded, but the genes seemed to have taken their toll." Martha looked so sad at this point that Megan wanted to hug her. But the gesture wouldn't have been natural for them, so the woman held back. "I never told about John's father, not even to him," he asked, of course, especially when he was a teenager. "I explained to him then that I really wanted a child. Age was pushing it, too. I didn't see any candidates for the role of father of the future baby around me. That's why I went to the resort that summer, to give myself a long-awaited gift. I lied to John then, that I specifically made a resort romance there in order to give birth for myself. He wasn't the only one who thought so, by the way I'd announced to everyone that my pregnancy was a conscious move, but it wasn't." Megan was silently catching every word. That frankness. Martha, it had never been so open. Martha was about 35 at the time, by today's standards a very young woman with everything ahead of her. Back then, she was considered an old maid. All deadlines for becoming a mother and wife had been missed. The train had left. Martha was not particularly worried about it. She devoted herself fully to her work. She had a responsible position, and there was always a lot to do. The woman liked to realize that she was such an important, indispensable person at the airport. She was respected, listened to, and even feared. Sometimes she regretted that she had not had a child and probably would not have one. But Martha didn't worry about that. She herself had grown up in an orphanage. She had seen so many unhappy fates and was not 100% sure that she could be a good mother and make her baby happy. That summer she was sent on a trip to the sea from the airport. Martha could afford to buy the tickets herself, but the union honored her as Employee of the Year. It's nice to be recognized and appreciated. The sanatorium turned out to be just wonderful. Comfortable room, sea in 5 minutes walk, wonderful dining room in walking distance. And there, in this sanatorium, Martha met her future father, John. It was a so-called business trip. A young guy about 10 years younger than Martha. He came from some northern town to work. It was Alex's first time at sea, and at first he looked a little dazed. It was even cute when Martha first noticed him in the dining room. The young man caught her eye immediately. He was good, really good, hair the color of ripe wheat, bright blue eyes. Those eyes would eventually play a key role in Martha's fate. He had amazing eyes, and I guess they were the reason I fell in love with him like a girl. I don't think I'd ever experienced anything like that even in my youth. Bottomless, bright blue, attentive. John inherited them. Richard and Stephen too, by the way. Alex had no idea he had a son and grandchildren, and that they had his eyes. Martha was now looking everywhere with her eyes for the handsome boy. At first she didn't understand why she did it, but he was a young man, so he was sure he would soon have no shortage of admirers like himself, young, lovely creatures. And so it was. For several days Martha watched from afar as Alex returned to the sanatorium with one and another beauty. All of them were just like a selection slim, tanned, smiling. Alex smiled a lot himself. He had a wonderful smile. From it the guy had charming dimples on his cheeks. One day the young handsome man himself approached Martha. Alex confessed to me that he had been watching me for a long time. He's incredibly attracted to me. It was unexpected to hear that. A young, handsome guy, whom I had been admiring from afar for about a week, was giving me compliments that made my head spin. I was desperately jealous of all those young beauties with whom he appeared in the sanatorium. And he, it turns out, at the same time dreamed of me and did not dare to approach, did not dare, because he was afraid of rejection. According to him, I looked beautiful and inaccessible. Martha began a stormy resort romance. They walked a lot in the neighborhood, swam at night in the sea, laughed. Martha felt 10 to 15 years younger next to him. It seemed she had never laughed so much even in her youth. It's been a wonderful week. I fell in love. I just lost my head, which doesn't usually happen to me. It was so unlike me. Alex had me under a spell, and I didn't notice a lot of things, a lot of obvious things. Martha always paid for her companion in cafes, at the canteen, on excursions. He never gave her anything, she never expected it. Being around this guy was a gift in itself. Then one day Martha woke up in her room, expecting to see Alex next to her. They'd taken a long walk along the night promenade, gazing at the stars, talking about everything, and had fallen asleep with their arms around each other in the morning. Martha felt so happy and peaceful in the arms of her lover. But when she woke up, she didn't see Alex beside her. Martha stretched and rolled over onto her other side. She was still not alert for anything. This had happened before. Alex had probably just gone out for coffee and pastries to surprise her. How nice it was to have someone care for you like that. Martha dozed for another half an hour, enjoying the peace and quiet. But the longer she was alone, the more she realized something was wrong. Finally, the woman, unable to bear the anxiety any longer, got up, and then everything became clear. Alex's belongings were gone, not his clothes, not his favorite wristwatch. He'd even remembered to bring a little thing like perfume and a toothbrush. So Alex left while Martha was asleep. He left quietly, so as not to wake the woman and explain himself to her. Why was everything fine yesterday? A wave of longing and despair and resentment swept into Martha. It became difficult to breathe. She wandered around the room and could not find a place to go. her heart clenched with unbearable pain. Martha thought she had found her soulmate. Alex had been so easy for her, so pleasant. Even though he was much younger, Martha felt supported by him. Nothing had foreshadowed this outcome. Just last night, Alex had hugged her tightly, showering her with kisses and compliments. He was seriously planning a future together. The guy lived in a small town in the north. He even called Marta to go there, and she was ready to give up her career, apartment, friends, everything, just to be near him. In desperation, Martha opened her closets again and again. Maybe Alex had just moved his things? What about himself? Maybe he was late for some reason. But Alex's clothes were nowhere to be found. Martha noticed some of her own things were missing. A box of gold jewelry. Martha had taken a small part of her tame jewelry on vacation, but they were her favorite 2 pairs of earrings, a dainty chain, and a bracelet with small sapphires. Original, exquisite pieces that you couldn't buy in every store. Martha's bracelet was imported from Germany. Now this jewelry box has disappeared. There was no half-empty bottle of Chanel No. 5 on the shelf in the bathroom. In the safe closet, the woman was missing 3-year-old dresses, which she bought when she was on vacation in Riga. Her heart clenched with a bad feeling. So is Alex just a criminal? I should probably write a report to the police. On the other hand, it was shameful to have to confess to strangers that she had lost her head in the arms of a young traitor and trusted him blindly. And a grown woman boss. Even Martha sat down on the sofa, hugged herself tightly, and began to sway. That's what she used to do when she was just a little girl. Martha had grown up in an orphanage. There you couldn't get comfort and sympathy from adults. So the girl got into the habit of hugging herself when she became an adult. Martha somehow outgrew this ritual, and in a moment of stress and despair, the habit returned. It was necessary to leave the stuffy room and take a walk along the shore. The fresh sea breeze would give strength and bring relief. Martha walked to the front door and noticed a note. Alex had left her some kind of message on the mirror. The heart glad for 3 fed a faint hope that everything would still be fine. Maybe the young man is just preparing some kind of surprise. And here she almost went crazy with worry. But the miracle didn't happen. Alex did run away, only for some reason it was important for him to explain his behavior to Marta. You've probably figured it out by now. Are you crying? You look at me, scolding yourself for being so gullible. I don't know why I'm writing all this. Usually I just leave. But you're really special. I can't do what I do to others. I really like you. You're strong and noble. You're also really beautiful. Probably any man would be happy with you, but not me. I realized a long time ago that my happiness is different from the idea of a prosperous life of most people. I like adventure, a change of location, meeting new people. I realized long ago that I can never be with one single woman. Family, children. Everyday life is not for me. That's the way I was born. My mother says I took after my father. I never knew him, by the way. He's also a vagabond, an adventurer. Probably this man does not even know of my existence. It doesn't matter. Of course I haven't told you a word of the truth. Well, almost know the fact that you are very beautiful, smart, strong. I really think so. Those words of mine were sincere. As for my biography, I named the wrong city. I lied about my age. My name isn't even Alex. That's my favorite part of making up a cover story, pretending to be someone else. Some people think of me as a young actor, some as a talented young engineer. It all depends on the inspiration. Sometimes it comes to me and I compose a story about a tragic fate. It is fascinating, interesting, exciting. And women like it. I know how to make them happy, even if only for a short time. Those burning eyes of yours, those admiring glances. I make the gray everyday life of single ladies bright, colorful, magical. And for all this in life, you have to pay. That's why I charge a small fee for happy weeks and days. You have to admit, it's only fair. Our week was one of the happiest weeks of your life, wasn't it? I'm moving on. New adventures, new stories. And you? No offense. You're really special to me. I usually leave in silence, I don't leave notes. But I wanted to explain myself to you. Martha hurried on, staring at the piece of paper, the reading hard to fit in her head. Alex, who isn't even Alex, is a professional Alfonso, living off women, flitting through life like a careless moth. He plays different roles and enjoys it. Most likely we are talking about some kind of special mental disorder. But a normal person can't live like that. Strangest of all, after reading the note, Martha agreed with Alex. The guy was right. This week was really the brightest and happiest in her life. Martha decided to keep this story in the depths of her memory, sometimes to come back to it again, to feel those bright, positive emotions that Alex gave her. But it turned out differently. When Martha returned from vacation, she realized that she was expecting a child. I realized that it was Alex's child, a man who was probably not quite mentally healthy, but I decided to keep it because, first of all, I was tired of being all alone, and secondly, probably I still loved Alex. Or rather, the image that that young man had created. At the due date, a wonderful, healthy, and strong boy was born. He had Alex's eyes. Martha had noticed that back in the hospital. The handsome, charming baby inherited other features of his father's appearance. He bore little resemblance to Martha. The woman prayed that the son's resemblance to Alexei would be limited to external features. Martha, knowing about the genes inherited by John, therefore paid special attention to the upbringing of her son. She developed responsibility, honesty, and kindness in him, and John seemed to grow up to be a wonderful guy. Martha anxiously searched for the traits of a reckless adventurer, as his father was, but did not find them. John faithfully did his homework, never skipped classes at school, and then at the university. When the boy grew up, Martha watched his relationships with girls with bated breath. But even here, John did not resemble Alex. Before Megan, the guy dated a former classmate. They were a couple for several years in a row. No torrid short-term affairs. When her son married Megan, Martha exhaled. It's okay. John has a beautiful wife, great kids, his own business. No, the son is nothing like the character of a careless Alfonso father. It was a success, but it turned out I'd been too early. Martha shook her head. Now I'm going to have to tell you the bitter and ugly truth about John. I kept silent while it was none of my business. Went through everything inside me. But now the welfare of my grandchildren is at stake. I can't let them be left with nothing. Megan realized what she was about to talk about. To make it easier for her mother-in-law, she spoke up. I know he's cheating on me. John has a young mistress. I've seen them together and even read the sweet couple's correspondence. Really? Martha's eyebrows rose in surprise. And why didn't you scandalize him? How did you even survive it? I'm just at a loss, Megan admitted. Having someone to talk to made her feel better. Yes, it was John's mother. But Megan sensed that she was completely on her side. I see. Martha nodded. Anybody would be confused. So you know about this, Catherine? Megan nodded, then asked. But how did you know about it? John told me, Martha said. He said he'd been unhappily married for a long time. That you, as his wife, didn't pay any attention to him. You'd lost yourself in the children in the house, become uninterested and indifferent. The usual male excuses. It was painful to realize that the only child in which so much invested in is capable of such a thing. Apparently, the genes still took their toll. Though not immediately, Megan could barely hold back her tears. But maybe he's right. I did have a lot to do with the kids in the house. Maybe John really did lack attention. I wish we had talked about it in time. He's wrong, Martha said flatly. There's more to it than that. Sometimes the feeling goes away. It happens. And it's normal. But this is different. John is lying to you, cheating on you. And that's the worst part. He and Catherine are going to leave you with nothing. You and the kids. How? Megan gasped. She was used to the idea of John cheating on her. And here was a new shock. It seemed to her that her husband adored children and would do anything to provide them with a happy future. And now this. Although these hints about preparing for divorce, this is their plan. It's sad. Martha shook her head. When I heard him, I wanted to give up the plan and my son right away. But then I decided to keep my emotions to myself. If I didn't agree, they'd think of something else. John felt like a happy man. He had achieved a lot in life, built a whole mini-empire, organized a network of plumbing stores. The man had a right to be proud of himself. His family life up to now, everything suited him: a beautiful wife, wonderful children, well-adjusted life. It was a kind of quest to get for the family funds, buy a new car, change the apartment to a large house. And then these tasks somehow ceased to fascinate and bring joy. It became too easy. John no longer needed money. They were enough for new acquisitions, and for traveling, and for children's education. The man suddenly got bored, and then just at this very moment, in his life appeared Catherine, young and energetic, loving adventures and adventures. She worked as a saleswoman in one of his stores. One evening, John stopped by the store to talk to the accountant, but the woman was no longer at work. Behind the counter, however, stood a new saleswoman, incredibly beautiful. She's openly flirting with the boss. But how can you resist? No, at first John resisted his feelings. His mother from childhood brought up in him responsibility, hammered into his head the true values of the family, so it was difficult for a man to make this step. But when it happened, John realized that all these years he had lived in the captivity of his own attitudes. With Catherine, John felt young and energetic again. She was as adventurous and capable of abnormal behavior as he was. Existence without this girl now seemed to John bland and boring. So it went on for several years. Feelings did not subside, on the contrary, flared up with renewed vigor. John was literally bewitched by his young, beautiful mistress. He did not want to part with her for a moment, but every or almost every evening he had to return to the boring Megan. The very atmosphere of the house, once warm and cozy, was weighing on John. He felt like he was in a prison. The lovers talked more and more about John needing to divorce Megan. It was a done deal. True, both of them did not want one thing, that half of all the property accumulated during the years of marriage passed into the ownership of the legal spouse. She wasn't working, was she? Catherine was indignant. She sat at home, cooking borscht, relaxing, watching soap operas while you worked. In justice, all property should belong to you and only you. That's true, John sighed. But the law is the law. Megan will be given half of the property acquired during the marriage. But isn't there a loophole in those laws? You're in a position to hire a good lawyer to figure something out. And one day there was a loophole. It was simple and complicated at the same time. It was suggested by a lawyer who was familiar with such issues. I have already had such cases in practice, said a man in a stylish suit. You need to sign over all the property to a person you trust. And your wife should trust him too. Maybe a close friend or relative. My clients explain this to spouses to preserve assets in case of business problems. Everyone has their own theory, and then you can initiate divorce proceedings. There is no property, there is nothing to divide, and the trusted person, after everything, just rewrites houses, apartments, cars on the already divorced spouse, that is, on you. That's it. John thought for a long time. After this conversation, he had only one candidate for the role of such a trustee, his mother. Megan would easily agree to sign over all the property to her. She trusts her mother-in-law. But how to go to her mother with such a request? She would have to confess everything to her, and yet there was no other way. John decided to have a serious conversation. He realized his mother would not be happy about the situation. But she's his mother, she will support her son and help him. It was a shame to give Megan half of what he earned. Especially since Megan did not work, lived a quiet and relaxed life. What right does she have to all this? Martha listened to her son in silence, not interrupting. As always, she looked unperturbed and somewhat detached. The only thing that betrayed the older woman's anxiety was her fingers, which tugged relentlessly at the long sleeve of her sweater. "Have you made up your mind?" Martha asked when her son had finished. Yes, he nodded. "Ew. Don't you feel sorry for Megan?" "I've fallen out of love with her. She's clearly indifferent to me. What are we going to do? Spend the rest of our lives together? What about assets? She hasn't invested a dime in the house or anything else. So that's fair. I was the only one working. She provided for you," Martha reminded me. "And she raised your children. Thanks to Karina, you could think of nothing else but the development of the business. She always took care of the rest. And remember Megan at first, she helped you a lot. Doing those reports at night, doing those estimates. That's when you got a staff of accountants." "You're exaggerating, Mom. You're exaggerating what she did." "All right, and the children?" It was obvious that Marta was struggling to keep it together. "What about the children? Am I going to pay child support for them? That's how I'll help them. So you'll help me? After a short silence, Martha nodded her head. John could see in her eyes that her mother didn't approve of what he was doing. Well, he hadn't expected anything else. The important thing was that she agreed. John signed over all the property to Martha. Megan did not suspect anything. She immediately believed in the fairy tale that John, in this way, just avoid unnecessary risks. Megan hadn't been paying much attention to anything lately. All her time and attention was devoted to her young daughter. Well, all the better. Catherine was as excited as a child. You bet, because everything was going so smoothly, without a hitch. It seemed to open up a happy, carefree future ahead. Catherine and John planned to celebrate their success with a trip to the sea. They had already chosen a resort, even argued a little about it. One day, when all the property was already rewritten to Martha, John dared to have a frank conversation with Megan. The man, of course, was worried. All the same to inform the person, with whom he lived so many years, such news, not very pleasant. But Megan took it all surprisingly calmly. Naive woman, apparently has not yet realized that she will not get anything in the divorce. She wouldn't find out until the courtroom, and even if she finds out sooner, there's nothing she can do about it. John officially moved into the apartment he'd rented for Catherine. Now it was just the two of them, waiting for the court hearing after which Megan would have to leave home. In the very apartment where they lived before John succeeded, on the street, the ex-wife and daughter will not stay. And the boys, they're already living in another city. Independent young men. You don't have to worry about them at all. And now, finally, the day has come. John and Catherine have waited so long for this date. Today, at last, it will be over. John will get freedom. A little later, will sign everything from his mother to himself, and the sweet couple will fly to the beach with white soft sand. Catherine decided to go to the meeting with her beloved. She wore an elegant suit, emphasizing the advantages of her luxurious figure, made light makeup, let her hair down. John once again admired the beautiful beloved. Yes, she looked like a supermodel from the cover of a magazine. In his youth, John had never dreamed of such girls, and here he was, a stunning beauty in love with him. In the conference room, John noticed Megan at once. She looked surprisingly calm and dignified. For some reason, Martha was sitting next to her, wearing the suit she had worn as an airport employee on the days when she needed luck. His mother's presence confused John. He wondered why she was here. She's sitting next to Megan. Come to support her sister-in-law. Odd, considering their plan. Catherine tensed at the sight of her future mother-in-law. She disliked Martha. She realized that the older woman was not happy that the young girl had broken up her son's tight-knit family. So what? What did her opinion matter? Absolutely none, she thought. Martha greeted her son and his companion with a nod of her head. Megan, on the other hand, said hello loud and friendly, even smiled. The hearing began. The judge read the divorce decree, determined the place of residence of the minor daughter with her mother, and announced the amount of alimony that must now be paid monthly on Vivian John. And then it came to the most important thing of all, property. Since you don't share any property, there is nothing to divide, the judge concluded. The wife's marital home remains hers. In general, that's not all. What about the gift? Martha spoke from her seat. As for your gift, it's not a subject for a court of law. What gift deed? John jumped up, his heart clenched with misgivings. Catherine, sitting next to him, smiled happily. She did not suspect anything yet. A deed of gift for all your family's property, which I made out to Megan, Martha replied, looking pointedly at her son, Megan, and the grandchildren. What did you think? I'm going to leave them on the street with nothing, so you can have a nice life while they all live in a cramped apartment. John's eyes blurred. Such a man did not expect such a mother. He looked at Catherine, beautiful face. The girl skewed. There was an evil grimace. She opened and closed her mouth in surprise. She tried to say something, but not a single word escaped her tongue. She even seemed to be out of breath. Megan looked calm and peaceful. The judge read out some more formalities regarding the divorce. Martha was whispering about something with her sister-in-law, and it was slowly dawning on John that it was over. Of course, Catherine would leave him now. She would not stay with him through the hard times. That's for sure. She would have to start all over again. All over again.